Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Registered Nursing Board meeting. It is November 15th, 2023. We will take roll call to establish a quorum at this time. My name is Dolores Trujillo. Currently, I am a practicing RN, and I was appointed by Governor Newsom to represent the direct care provider role, and I am the current president of the board. Vice President and Board Member, Mary Fagan.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Mary Fagan, and I was appointed by Governor Newsom in the Nursing Services Administration role.
Thank you, Mary. Board Member Jovita Dominguez.
Ms. Jovita Dominguez, and I was appointed by Governor Newsom in the education role.
Thank you, Jovita. Board Member Patricia Nguyen.
Good morning, everybody. Tricia Nguyen. I was appointed by Governor Newsom in the public member role. Thank you.
Thank you, Tricia. Board Member David Lawler.
Hi, I'm David Lawler. I was appointed by Governor Newsom in the public member role.
Thank you, David. Board Member Vicki Granowitz.
Hi, Vicki Granowitz. I was appointed by Senator Pro Tempore Tony Atkins in the public member role.
Thank you, Vicki. Board Member Allison Cormack.
And Cormack, I was appointed by the prior Speaker of the Assembly in a public member role.
Thank you, Allison. And I want to extend a warm welcome to our newest board member, Neelu Patel.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Neelu Patel, and I was appointed by Governor Newsom recently for the advanced practice role. And just a little bit about myself, I've been a nurse for 25 years and an advanced practice nurse, specifically a certified registered nurse anesthetist for 20 years. So I am just glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Neelu. We're happy to have you. And our executive officer, Loretta Melby.
Thank you. I'm Loretta Melby, or Lori, and I'm the board's executive officer appointed by the board.
Thank you, Lori. And our board counsel, Reza Pejouhesh. Great.
Hey, everybody, it's Reza Pejouhesh, board legal counsel.
Thank you, Reza. Thank you, everyone. We will now, quorum has been established. We will move on to our meeting. We will move on to item 2.0. This is the general instructions for the format of a teleconference call. BRN moderator.
Good morning. This is the BRN moderator. I will be moderating the meeting. To facilitate public comment, we will be utilizing the WebEx question and answer feature. When the board reaches a point in the agenda at which public comment is appropriate, the question and answer feature will be turned on, and members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by inserting the phrase, "I would like to make a comment," in the question box, which is typically in the lower right of your screen. I will then call on the individual and unmute their microphone. The individual will have 2 minutes to make their comments. I will not give a warning as your time approaches. I will mute your microphone and then will announce that your time has exceeded the time allotted. I will then proceed to the next member of the public who has a comment. Please note that the question and answer feature is being used only as a means for members of the public to represent that they would like to make a verbal comment. When your turn comes, you will be prompted to unmute. If your question can be answered, the board will respond accordingly. When making your comment, speak about anything you believe is important for the members to know. Remember, board members cannot address any item not on the agenda. Items not on the agenda at that moment, items that you would like to add to a future meeting, or items that will be discussed later on in the agenda will be discussed in their correct times during the meeting. I will provide a brief reminder of this approach at the start of each public comment item. Finally, when board members or BRN staff are not speaking, I would like to remind them to mute their microphone. If I detect background noise during the meeting as a result of unmuted microphones, I will mute your microphone for you. Thank you.
Thank you. BRN moderator, can you open it up for public comments for items not on the agenda and items for a future agenda?
We will be opening for public comment now. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment.
Did we lose your board moderator?
Sorry, I lost it. Nope, I lost it.
Okay, no problem.
Oh, there it is. I'm sorry. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Board President Trujillo, there are no public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, please. Thank you. Moving on to item 4.0, review and vote on whether to approve previous meeting minutes. These are the meeting minutes from the last board meeting. This is from August 23 and 24th, 2023. I would like to ask the board if you have any questions or comments regarding these minutes. No? Okay. So I'd like to make a motion. The motion is to accept board meeting minutes from August 23rd to 24th, 2023, and allow BRN staff to make non-substantive changes to correct name misspellings and or typo that may be discovered in the document. Do I have a second?
Oh,
Thank you.
While I have the floor, could I ask a quick procedural question?
Sure.
I don't see a way to raise my hand, which is how I would have done this in prior things, to let the board president know when I would like to make my comments. What is the feature that people use on WebEx to do this?
Pretty much we insert either comment if we're being asked for a comment or question, just as just now when I asked for a second, I did have Jovita and I don't know who the second person.
So it's me, this is Allison.
Thank
So
you, Allison.
I'm sorry, I still don't understand. Do you want me to put it in the Q&A box if I'm seconding? Do you want us just to unmute when it's our turn?
Just unmute and come on, Allison.
Yeah.
We do not have the raise hand feature on WebEx. If we were to have that feature activated, it would be activated for all of our attendees and panelists. There is not a way to designate it just for panelists. We also disable the comment box when we're not in public comment as to control some of the traffic that may come into the comment box. So treat it as in person, and when you have something to add, just go ahead and speak up and we will work with accommodation.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess the other way that I've seen it done is people wave their hand. If the board is watching, then you can wave your hand when you want to turn, but we'll just go with unmuting. Thank you.
Please, yes. Some of the views, like my view right now only shows 4 members at a time. And so you may be missed if you're just doing the hand raise. So just go ahead and unmute and continue to talk.
All right, we have a motion on the floor for acceptance of the minutes. I believe Jovita.
It was Allison that was seconded.
Okay, we'll take Allison. BRN moderator, can you please open it up for public comment?
The comment now. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment."
While we're waiting for public comment, I forgot one thing. When you do go ahead and make comment, if you can announce your name as you're making the comment, that way our meeting minutes person would be able to know exactly who is speaking, who is making the comment.
This is Reza, just adding on to that board, on the board's legal counsel. As far as identifying yourself, just know it is optional. So if you're comfortable with sharing who you are, or who you represent, please, as Lori said, announce that. But no, it is not necessarily required if you're not comfortable.
That was actually not to the public members. I apologize. I was actually continuing my thought because staff reached out to me on board member participation. So when like Allison was asking, I just forgot to have her say when you go to make a comment, if you could speak up and say, this is Allison, and then continue to speak. That would be helpful for our staff taking minutes. But yes, Reza, you're absolutely appropriate for clarifying that, because I did say that right before public comment. And no, you do not have to identify yourself at all.
That's what I thought you were referring to, was the public. So, hey, for the public,
Yeah, that was my
consider my comment.
It's all good.
Sorry.
Thank you, Reza.
Thank you. Board President Trujillo, there are no public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, please. Thank you. So we have a motion on the floor, and we will take it to a vote. Dolores Trujillo votes yes. Vice President and Board Member Mary Fagan.
Unable to be at that board meeting.
Board Member Jovita Dominguez.
Jovita votes yes.
Board Member Tricia Nguyen. Board Member David Lawler. David, you're muted.
My bad. David Lawler votes yes.
Yeah, thank you. Board Member Vicki Granowitz. Board Member Allison Cormack.
Board Member Allison Cormack votes yes.
And Board Member Neelu Patel.
Neelu Patel votes. I'll abstain since I wasn't at that meeting.
Thank you, Neelu. All right, motion carries. Moving on to item 5.0, this is the report of the Administrative Committee. Lori will give the Executive Officer report.
One by one through these agenda items for 5.0. Thank you, Board President. So just activities from me since the last board meeting. I attended various meetings with lobbyists and legislative staffers, some meetings that included both DCA agencies and the governor's office. I participated in the APRN Coalition. I worked with DCA on the military portability. We welcomed HCI staff into our offices to help with licensing. I attended NCSBN education calls, Executive Officer Leadership Council, Policy Knowledge Network, Operation Nightingale meetings, and a symposium on solutions for addressing nursing workforce crisis. I additionally met with community college leaders to discuss nursing faculty salaries. I met with Helen Dowden and the DOR to discuss Pathway to Success, which is a nursing initiative. They will actually present at our next board meeting. I participated in IACA, which is a apprenticeship committee. I met with California Hospital Association, discussed opportunities in the nursing space. I met with the Hospital Association of Southern California and provided an update at their Nursing Advisory Council meeting. I had meetings with the Bureau of Private Post-Secondary Education, as well as the Board of Vocational Nursing. We are looking to formalize an MOU with the Chancellor's Office for Community College. I did meet with them as well. We also met with DCA regarding rolling out SB 104, which is a public health nurse waiver. We have set out messages regarding starting January 1. They will not have to pay a fee for initial PH license or renewals. I did attend a economics of nursing migrations, cost and contributions of immigrant nurses into the U.S. put on by CGFNS. I traveled and presented at the COADN meeting. I attended DEI training for leaders through SOLID with DCA. I also worked with DCA and bureaus to discuss crossover issues with the med spas. I presented at LAC Public Health. I met with pre-licensure nursing programs, both current and proposed. Some, as examples, were Arizona State University and University of St. Augustine. I presented and provided a BRN update at an SEIU steering committee meeting. I provided a BRN update at the CON ADN South meeting, and I attended the HCI Workforce Council. Additionally, I joined a newly formed Health Workforce Coordinating Committee. That committee is composed of agency and department leaders from across state agencies that administer healthcare workforce funds with the purpose of sharing information and activities related to developing California's health workforce. We were working to identify best practices and relevant experiences to inform the efficient use of the state's resources, inviting input and perspective to help inform agencies and departments' decision, reaching mutual agreements to strategically align and coordinate activities, building relationships and trust among agencies and departments that are employing health investments. Those are my meeting and my work outside of regular BRN activities reported out to you today. Do you guys have any questions or comments for me?
I have a quick question.
First, yes.
The first question is, what do you do in your spare time? That was a lot of stuff, Laurie. Holy cow. We are well represented having you on board. Thank you.
Thank you. I think my husband would agree.
One thing that tickled my curiosity was the meeting with the junior colleges or community colleges in California and discussing salaries. And I'm just kind of wondering if we have a role to play in that, or if there's anything we can do to try to remedy that sticky problem.
Yeah, that is a sticky problem. We do need to kind of stay separate from salary discussions because we are the licensing board. However, what I was able to contribute is to talk about how BRN approves faculty and the various ways to enter into academia. That is actually something that was presented to the Chancellor's Office for the community colleges looking to adopt the BRN faculty approvals for RN nursing programs and not have a different approval process. So providing information that, offering support for that, as well as providing examples that other states and executive officers have shared with me. One was there was legislation that was introduced into Washington state, as well as legislation introduced into Oregon, both shared with me from their EOs during NCSBN meetings. And so I was able to pass that on as helpful information, but not be directly involved in pursuing any faculty wage increase.
Thank you.
Lori, what was the, I don't want to say reason, but when HCI came in to look at our licensing?
So DCA will actually be giving a report out with us on that. We were granted a large amount of money through DCA to work on access and workforce for RNs, for nursing. And so they are here in our offices. Currently, they've been here for just over a month. And they are working on clearing out any licensing backlog that we might have in our endorsement programs. That is where they're starting at this point. We'll be able to report out more as I know more, because that is something that's being led by DCA. And when we have a report that is written and wrapped up with that, we'll be able to share out more about it. But we're excited. We are one of the only boards in the history that I'm aware of that have gotten an additional about 15 people, some project managers, some IT support, and a lot of funding to work on nursing workforce.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from board members? Seeing that there is no more questions or comments from the board, BRN moderator, can you please open it up for public comment?
We will be opening for public comment now. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, I would like to make a comment. Jenny Macias would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Yes, I just wanted to thank you, Lori, for speaking with the Chancellor's Office on behalf of our ADN programs. And again, if there is anything that we can do on our side to help out recruitment and retainment, please let us know. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Just let you know that I was informed that there is a meeting being held this Friday via Zoom to discuss that proposal. And you may choose to reach out to Nanette Solveson, I believe is how you say her name. She would have the details for you.
All right. Thank you, Lori.
Thank you. No problem.
Thank you for your comment. Board President Trujillo, there are no other public requests for comment. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, thank you. So items 5.2 and 5.3, we will listen to the report out on both. This is information only. And after the 5.3 information only, we will open it up for public comments. Lori?
Yeah, thank you, Dolores. One thing to just clarify or just updates, we did take feedback from the prior board meeting on the strategic plan. We did highlight the changes that were added from the last board meeting report out to this current board meeting report out. And it was also asked that we put a date. And so we were able to go back and locate the month and the year for each one of the items that we had completed. Previous strategic plan goal updates, you would see at the top that just said these items were placed up under completed activities, and then we had items down under ongoing activities. So what we worked on was implementing that feedback, where we did actually put the month and year and then highlighted anything that was updated. You might see that things are a little bit out of the order that it was previously, because when we did add the dates, we went ahead and put them in date order. So just a quick overview on the updates. I'll go through the highlighted sections, and if you guys have any questions, please stop me and let me know. We did implement an automatic initial review, and if deficiencies exist, an email notification is sent. What that looks like is when an application is received, an email goes out to that applicant, sending them to a web page to ensure that they know that everything what everything is required to complete that application. We are finding that people are not aware of the items that are needed to complete the application process, and therefore we're having some difficulties with deficiencies. We can't issue a license until we receive a complete application. So what we've been receiving in the past are applications that are incomplete. So by sending them this link and directing them to a website that is specific for like an RN endorsement, they will know that they additionally have to complete, in addition to the fee being paid and the application being completed, they need to give us a nurse's verification to ensure that they are licensed in another state. And then they would have to turn in transcripts that prove that they have met our academic requirements for nursing licensure. And then they would also have to complete a fingerprint background. The fingerprint background that we request or encourage would be the live scan. That typically is an electronic process that happens here in California. We get results back in about 3 days. When a out-of-state person uses the hard card process, which is required for any fingerprinting that's done out of state, which is kind of a catch-22, that can take up to 3 months to complete. That is a Department of Justice requirement that out-of-state participants do hard cards. So we have updated our website. We have added some language to let people know that if you are planning to travel into California, whether to interview for a position, visit family and friends, or secure housing before you come in to actually obtain a job, that you do a little side stop and complete your live scan process while you're here in California. So that is an update. What that also did is allowed us to no longer focus on initial review dates for our license application reviews. Previously, we had a regulation that said we would review all license applicants received within 90 days. And that was not effective. And we're actually processing much faster than that. So we repealed those regulatory options throughout this process, and they are now getting reviewed within a week or two. So very, very good things coming from that. If you go down a bit on the advanced practice, you can see that we implemented the initial phase of the auto issuance of public health nurse certificates for California grads. California grads that graduate from a BSN program and become licensed in California, most of those programs meet the PHN certificate requirements. So at that point, if they choose to apply for a PHN, it would be auto issued to them. It is a cloning process that was added to pull the same education information that's used on their RN application that would then populate and approve their PHN if they apply for that as well. We expanded the portal that the California deans and directors use to graduate and enter the academic information for our California nursing students to also include PHN. So if an applicant applies and they put the school code in, that school code will then show up on a dashboard for the program director. That program director will go in, click on the dashboard, and give the academic information, and no transcripts are needed for our California schools. And then we streamlined the process for approval of Schedule 2 when advanced pharmacology content is verified during the furnishing application review. Previously, as a nurse practitioner or nurse midwife, they would have to apply separately for a Schedule 2 designation that would then be added to their online license lookup, and the DEA would then confirm so that they could then prescribe Schedule 2. That is no longer needed. We do have an option for those that don't currently have it, but anybody now that applies for a furnishing license, if they turn in the verification form signed by the nurse practitioner or nurse midwife program director stating that they've completed the additional education on Schedule 2, we will issue a Schedule 2 designation at the same time that we issue the furnishing license, and it's no longer required to have a second application for that. I did report out in my EO activities that I am working with GCA to implement the new professional license portability provisions within the Federal Service Member Civil Relief Act. What that is a mini military compact. And so what that does is allow for anybody that is licensed as RN that is associated with the military, either currently working as a military member or a spouse domestic partner. They can come into California on orders and not need to apply for a California license. They would be able to work on the license that they currently have in their state. There are some specific guidance around that. It is on our website, and those have to be met. But we will be obtaining and maintaining a listing of these nurses that are practicing in our state without a California license that employers can go and verify that they have been approved through us, because they do have some minimum criteria that do need to be met in order to be on that listing so that they can be employed here in California. We, on page 5, there's ongoing continuous quality improvement efforts and website enhancements to provide that transparent communication. We do get a lot of phone calls just with people being kind of confused as what they're still deficient in. And so we're working very hard to make that very clear. You go down to appropriate fees on page 6. We added what the cost is being saved by all of those updates that we had done previously, and then we added in the license verification that's completed through Nurses. That was a miss, although it had been completed a year ago. We forgot to add that in. And then on ongoing activities, you can see where we're really looking to streamline some of our applications, decrease the cost to our public, and work to bring fees into alignment. On page 7, there is some updates to regulation that allows us to improve the endorsement application process. The one that you guys are familiar with is CCR 1410.5. That is the one that allows for nurses who have been educated outside California who did not have a laboratory component for their microbiology or their anatomy and physiology to not have to retake that, as long as they've been practicing in good standing for 2 years and did actually take the theory component of both of those subject matters and passed successfully. And then you'll see just a repeat of that automatic initial review that we talked about earlier. And then the DCA executed contract with Horn. That is actually the HCI one that I talked about earlier in my EO report. Moving on to enforcement, we are continuing quality improvement efforts to eliminate paper case processing. That is huge, so much paper, but we're working with various legal and judicial efforts to kind of decrease all of that, and then streamlining our process between us, the Attorney General's, and Division of Investigations to not require paper printing out, scanning in, sending, etc. On to page 18 on continuing education, we continue to look at that organizational structure. For board members that are familiar with this, it'll just be an ongoing, and I'll carry on and update the new board members. We had a unit that was created as part of our organizational structure for continuing education and research that was given to us probably 5 years ago now. And they, in the development of that unit, they put a supervising nursing education consultant over the entire unit and an additional NEC in the unit to do continuing education provider approvals by vetting those courses. The problem with that is we are unable to hire NECs or supervising nursing education consultants as well. So the supervisors are even more rare than the NECs. And so when you start a unit, you want to get a supervisor in place. We have not been able to get a supervisor in place. So we are looking at that job classification, and we will probably move forward with a reorg to change that. And we would not have a supervising nursing education consultant over that. The only NEC in that unit is can report to a supervising nursing education consultant that's over the academic areas, and that is similar to what is done in enforcement. The NEC that's in enforcement reports to the NECs, the supervising NECs over the pre-licensure programs. So that would be in alignment with what we're doing in other areas, and hopefully open up that we can get a supervisor in that could then staff that unit, and we can get it up and going. We are also partnering with OIO to map out the process for the audit, as well as approvals. What that's going to do is allow for us, once that mapping is done, to create an updated online system. We are looking at the Realtor Board as kind of an example. They have a wonderful asset to their realtors that they're able to come in, go onto their website, find all of their continuing education providers in a one-stop shop with courses and topics. And that is what we want to provide. So by doing that, we have to start with a mapping process. On to page 12 or 19 of the packet, but 12 of the strategic plan, going over educational oversight, continuing to kind of partner with Bureau of Private Post-Secondary Education, the community colleges, chancellor's offices, and this really kind of updating our process to streamline that. A lot have been going on in the education oversight, as well as, coming into line with various new goals and procedures. And then we are still collaborating with DCA's OIS to develop another dashboard. And what we want to add to that dashboard is a tracking system of all of the enrollment increases. What we've been doing previously is just putting it on an Excel document, sharing it with our board members, pulling it into materials as a data sheet for you guys. So you can see this is the activity that's gone on per region for every single enrollment increase. What we want to do is add that to our website so that it's accessible to everybody. There's a lot of really great information on that tracking document that has been utilized over the last few years when working with various stakeholders. BRN previously had been seen as a block to student slots, and we were able to, by pulling data, prove that the Board of Registered Nursing from 2018 forward had not denied a single enrollment increase request that had been put in front of them. It wasn't until this year in February of 2023 that we actually did our first denials in a very long time. And so that information is key to have out there to kind of clear up some misinterpretation or misrepresentation. And so we want to be as transparent as possible. So I'm working with DCA to get that out as a dashboard and added to our website. With that regional data, going on to the next page, we did start a discussion at the February board meeting to look at workforce and forecasting, and we did extend the contract from UCSF into the next year so they can continue to provide our pre-licensure research information as well as our workforce information. On to page 15 or 22 of the packet on continuing on to educational oversight. With the sunset bill that became law at the beginning of the year, they did change the curriculum hours to a 500 direct patient care. It was shared out in last month's August, that all programs have come into compliance and they are all operating under the 500 direct patient care. Additionally, they are also in compliance with the implicit bias graduation requirement that was passed the year prior. Onto laws and regulations. Our Chief of Ledge Affairs attended the Congressional Nursing Workforce Summit in Fresno. I heard a lot of amazing things about Marissa representing our board and standing in for us, and that was fantastic. We hope to be able to continue that. We also initiated an email notification process to notify appropriate external stakeholders when a webcast of meetings is available, and we're adding that to the BRN website. And then again, per my EO update, myself and NECs, as well as the Chief of Licensing and Chief of Ledge, did attend the joint COAD and CACN meeting in Monterey in October of this year. We did provide technical assistance to many bills impacting the BRN and other pending bills that would affect licensees. We're continuing to work with DCA and as said in the in the EO report as well, we're continuing to work on the Federal Servicemen Civil Relief Act, the PHN fee waiver, and then we're also looking at, we work together to expedite licensures after we implemented BPC 870, which allowed for providers who will be assisting in abortive procedures to get an expedited license. On to page 19, there is more bills and stuff that were worked on, and that's AB 633. And then we did a regulatory change, a section 100 is what they're called, where we updated 1463. And those go through pretty quick, but they do still require a lot of work. And going through DCA's reg, attorney, DCA review, agency review, and then off to the Office of Administrative Law. And so Marissa Clark, our Chief of Ledge, led her team through that, and we're able to get a lot of those successfully completed. And then we did initiate a rulemaking package to update 16 CCR 1426. The reason that does need to be updated is they told us it was not a section 100, we tried it that way. And what we're trying to align is with the new statute that said 500 direct patient care hours. That does conflict with what's in our regulatory language, where it says 75% must be in direct patient care for each one of the content areas. And so we want to clear up any kind of miscommunication or confusion that would come from that. So we're deleting that sentence out of 1426G2, and we hope to be able to complete that soon. Moving on to page 23, there are just some activities for continuing education. I presented the update to the USP, the pharmacopoeia compounding information in February that became effective this month, as well as added presentations from NCSBN on the nursing shortage that occurred at the last board meeting. They're here again today for 2 more presentations. We completed the SLEA, and I also presented to the board on IV hydration. Goal 7 is outreach. We did purchase Hootsuite software to create more engaging social media content and increase visibility. We are gaining some followers, and so that's awesome. Any way that we can get good information out about the BRN and provide some helpful guidance is really something that we're looking to develop. And so we are on Instagram, we are on Facebook, and we will be kind of moving into other social media avenues. We do have the BRN report that comes out, but we're looking forward to that. So that is on our current strategic plan. There's a really easy update on the old strategic plan is we've met all the goals. Goals that are ongoing got moved to the current strategic plan. So we are able to close out the old strategic plan as completely met. Any questions from board members or comments before we go out to public comment, as this is information only?
Board member Allison Cormack. I so appreciate the dates and the highlights. It's infinitely easier this go round to see what's been accomplished in between last time and this time. I won't ask you about all the acronyms. Let's just say that I know everyone who is involved in this forgets that people who aren't nurses or members of the public would have absolutely no idea what all of these acronyms mean. So I'll just drop that as a note. Really my question is about the ongoing activities. Of all of them listed, and there are many, what are the top 3 that you think will make the most difference for the board, for nurses, for members of the public going forward? What are the 3 that we should be thinking about, looking at for seeing how we're doing next time and the time thereafter?
I think the one that affects our licensees the most is the one under licensing with the HORN staff in HCI. I truly think that is going to create a lot of change within our licensing process. And so that would be one of our main ones. When we look at the other ones are really going to be the IT updates. Truly anything that we can do IT, because we are one of the largest boards in our state. The state contractors board is very big. Barbering and Cosmo is very big. We are very large. We have, 500,000 licensees that are RNs, and that is not to count any of the additional certifications. So when you've got numbers of licensees, and I'll quote it off here, RNs, we have 532,000. Clinical nurse specialists, we have 3,200. Nurse anesthetists, 3,100. Nurse midwives, 1,400. Nurse practitioners, 38,000. Psych mental health RNs are 200. Public health nurse are 42,000. And then we have 2,000 continuing education providers. In addition to all of those, we offer temporary license, we offer furnishing license, we offer the Schedule 2 that we talked about. There are many licensing processes that are always going on in our board. And when you look at the increase in license applicants from 2020, where we had 10,000 endorsing RNs, and we're maintaining the last 2 years at about 40,000 endorsing RNs, in order to accommodate an increasing applicant number like that with the same amount of staff, that has to be done through IT. And we have to do that through providing a bunch of updated assistant and streamlining processes. So those are two of the big things that internal BRN are huge that we're going to have to work with. The third one that are asking is going to be communicating all of that out, getting everybody on the same page, making sure that the requirements and everything are clear and on our website, out on social media, that we're communicating that out through meetings, providing clarification, question answers, etc. So there is a lot, but those are the three primary ones that will have the biggest impact.
Okay. I really appreciate you coming up a level on that, because it's important to understand, we've got so many details here, and what are the things that are really going to make a difference. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And then just for those, when I was using the acronyms to explain on the document itself, it will actually say what those acronyms are. So like when I said SLAA or SLAY, it says it's the State Leadership Accountability Act, and then it will have the acronym that follows that. So in the materials, you should be able to look to see what that is. Example as well, so is DCA's Office of Informational Services, and what I would say is OIS. And so we did try desperately to make sure that was at least the first time it was used in the document, to have that clear, so that when we do see the acronym later on, that's someone is able to follow that.
Lori, I have a question. It's Mary Fagan. First of all, great job for you and your team. You guys, so much progress has been made with the strategic plan, and I really love having the dates on there. Really makes it very clear and transparent about how we're moving. The one area that you mentioned, and I think we may have talked about this in the past, but I want to ask again, that really is a challenge, is the live scan for out of state for nurses applying for licensure by endorsement. Is there any way that, and I know it's a Department of Justice requirement, is there any way that we as the board can have any impact on that to make it easier so that people could use the live scan out of state as well, and really facilitate getting their licenses?
The short answer that I don't want to give is no. And unfortunately, we have no influence on that. It's a Department of Justice, FBI, Corey background issue that is really out of our hands. So what we're trying to do is there is this huge block in processing because of that. What can we do to get the education out that says there is a better way? And if you're traveling to California, please do that. Because if you're thinking about you're becoming licensed in California, the intent is to provide services in California. And so I'm hoping that at some point prior to getting a job in California that you travel here, that you're finding or looking for housing, that you're interviewing, that you're visiting the wonderful state. And at that point, you could take 15 minutes, get your live scan, and we'll get the results in 3 days versus up to 3 months. If they do it as part of a hard card process, it is a manual fingerprint rolling where you do have to have the card stock, where that card stock actually has to be provided by us and mailed out. And thousands and thousands are mailed out on a weekly basis. It does require at least one full-time staff to process all of that. And I can only the postage is insane that we pay for those. So if there was any way that we could eliminate hard cards, I would do it in a heartbeat, because it does take an entire employee position. It does take a lot of money on postage and supplies, and it does delay the application processing time for any of our applicants. But we don't have any influence on that other than just saying, please do it live scan when you come into California.
This must impact all boards, right? Not just Board of Nursing?
Yes, yes. And DCA actually identified that when we were doing the Enlightened License Project. And as part of that Enlightened License Project, DCA was trying to centralize the hard card process for all boards and bureaus within DCA. We have not heard an update on that, but the last that we did hear is there was some barrier between DOJ and DCA on getting that completed. Right now, anybody that does a hard card pays a $49 fee to the board or bureau that they're applying for. They get the hard card from them that's mailed to them. That can take up to 2 weeks to get that out and to the recipient. And then they have to take that down to like the police department, have their fingerprints rolled, and then they mail that in. It's collected at that board or bureau. That board or bureau then verifies that payment's been received, and then it is sent over to the Department of Justice for processing. So even that kind of process is a huge delay compared to somebody that live scans. If you do a live scan, you don't pay us any fee. And you go to a live scan operator, they roll their fingerprints on a computer. It is sent to them instantly that day, and it is sent to us results typically within about 3 days, all through an electronic process.
Thank you. What a challenge.
It is, definitely.
Thank you, Lori.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Neela.
Okay, great. Neelu Patel here. And I share the sentiments that, you know, there's been a tremendous amount of work that has been done at the BRN level. And I appreciate to see how much it's growing and improving. And thank you for leading that charge, Lori. I do have a question regarding staffing. You know, I know that in previous board meetings, there was a mention that there was an initiative to increase staffing at the BRN level to ensure that licensing was going to continue to be improved. Are we continuing to increase staff at the BRN level just to ensure that, you know, this growing number, as you mentioned, 532,000 RNs and those that are seeking licensure in the state, that we're meeting that need by having people available? I'm hearing, you know, that it's really difficult basically to contact somebody there at the BRN. So can you speak to that?
It is difficult to contact the BRN via phone. We receive I think in June of last year, one of the report outs I received is over 100,000 phone call attempts in just June of last year. So the volume of calls is a lot. Some of them are repeat callers. Some of them will be people that call, you know, 50 times, just hang up, call back, hang up, call back, hang up, call back. And some will call on a home phone, pick up another cell phone and call on that, and pick up on another cell phone and call on that. And so the same person is calling 3 different times. And when they do get a person, they're like, oh, wait, let me hang up my other phones. And then we're made very much aware that that has occurred. With our new phone system that we rolled out a few years ago, the other thing that we can do is when someone says, you know, I've called 50 times, we can actually pull a report and see if they truly did call 50 times. And if that's something that we can do like a process improvement. Mostly the phone calls that we get are licensing related, and they want us to expedite their license. So by us doing the improvements on the licensing side to speed up that process, to provide more clarification, offer the expedites, we expect our call volume to decrease. So as we improve the other areas, that will decrease the call volume, which will answer that. Now, after that, to talk about staffing. This is a state agency, and we don't get to staff like people do in public age and private industry. And so we actually did not grow at all this year. We actually lost positions this year. So what you do is a budget change proposal. There was a very large budget change proposal done a few years ago. And we got many positions approved on that, but we were not able to recreate the data to provide that continued support. So with that, we corrected the data, and by correcting the data, we did lose 7 positions on that. So we lost positions. The other thing is when we look to add positions, what we have to do is show that there is a need first. And then showing that there's a need, we do a budget change proposal, we put that forward, it goes through several areas to gain approval. Our biggest impedance to that is our vacancy rate. We have about a 13% vacancy rate. The majority of that does live within our nursing education consultants, and we cannot get them hired. That is a huge barrier. So similar to what I was talking about in the continuing education unit, when you have a supervising nursing education consultant as a supervised designate in that unit, and we can't get them hired, they cannot hire the 6 vacancies in that unit specifically. Additionally, in the nursing education unit, they have 4 NEC vacancies. They've got a vacancy in enforcement and a support person at the NEC units as vacant as well. A lot of that comes down to what we talked about in a previous board meeting when there was public comment, was the wages for our NECs. And so there was a union negotiation, some bargaining. There was a very small increase that was gained through that bargaining, and the NECs were very disappointed by that. I believe the bargaining came out as only 5%, and that doesn't even meet cost of living. And so that is a detriment on getting those positions filled. So as long as we have vacancies, we can't justify a need for additional staff. And so we're kind of caught in this catch-22. And additionally, why we're looking at reorg, why we're looking at whether or not we have the right positions in the areas, and seeing what we can do to be creative to be able to get a better workforce, by not a better workforce, but a more complete workforce, I guess is the best way to put that. So that we can get the assistance that we need to operate as this very large board.
Thank you for highlighting all those issues.
Can I quickly follow up on your answer, Director Melby? Just if I'm thinking about the way, and I know that this is a public organization and not a private one, but when you can't get through on the phone, sometimes there are chat options, right? And you can use artificial intelligence, and you can solve all of the verification parts ahead of time. What are we doing as the BRN to take advantage of that? Because I can certainly imagine if I was calling in and was online, you know, the fact that people are calling on multiple devices means that they're having trouble getting through and they're frustrated. So is there another way we can use technology, as you said, one of our second ongoing activities, in a way that people expect to be able to use it today?
We've explored the Google Bot, and then just some background on that as well. We do not have our own IT. Our IT is shared with Department of Consumer Affairs. And so with that, Department of Consumer Affairs has multiple boards and bureaus, and we are in line with everybody else. So it is not a quick process, but they are very supportive. They gave us the suggestion of the Google Bot. That is something that we looked into. However, a Google Bot is programmed off your website. And when our website is not up to date or clear, we cannot have a Google Bot. So you would see throughout the strategic plan that we did a lot of updates to our website, and we're continuing to provide updates to our website as we find old forms and we update processes. So we have to do a stepped-in approach to that. We have to update our processes. We have to then update our website. And then once we're updated, we'll be able to entertain a thought of getting a Google Bot, because a Google Bot is programmed off your website.
Okay, well, look forward to seeing that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions or comments from the board members? All right.
Okay, there is no motion or vote that needed, so we can go out to public comment on the strategic plan and goal progressions.
Thank you, Lori. BRN moderator, please open it up for public comment.
The comment now, please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Ron would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Good morning.
Good morning, Ron.
Good morning to the board. My name is Ron Ordona. I am with CANP, the California Association for Nurse Practitioners, co-chair of the Health Policy and Practice Committee. Thank you, EL Melby, for the updates. Streamlining the furnishing licensing is very helpful. But we just wanted to clarify some changes to the CS2 renewals. We used to have the CE course online on our website, but recently our members reported that they were told by the BRN that it is no longer being accepted. So we wanted to clarify that if there are any changes as relates to CS2 renewals. Thank you.
There is. Thank you, Ron. And part of that strategic plan, we talked about the streamlining of the Schedule 2. So on the application for a nurse practitioner furnishing that is referenced in regulations, so we cannot update or change that, the advanced pharmacology verification is required for the furnishing license. On page 2 of that, there are some bullets that specifically answer the Schedule 2 questions for preparation to be able to issue those. If that form is signed, there is no continuing education that is needed. And in fact, that Schedule 2 is added to the furnishing license on that initial application. Now, when looking at as everybody knows, we're going through all of our regs and all of our statutes to make sure that we are in alignment with them. When looking at what we were doing previously, it was noticed that we were doing it incorrectly. And so we did make the choice to move to the correct form. And in our statute, it says that they will have that training as part of their advanced pharmacology. We then followed that. I worked with legal. I worked with the chief of licensing. We got some messaging out, and you could find the updated messaging on our website under nurse practitioner furnishing as well as nurse midwife furnishing. That is updated. The continuing education, if you look at the statute around Schedule 2, that continuing education actually is needed for renewal, not initial issuance. So that continuing education will be an ongoing thing that will have to be completed every 2 years if the nurse practitioner or the nurse midwife who wants Schedule 2 privileges want to continue that. So they'll have to complete the 2 hours for a nurse midwife or 3 hours for a nurse practitioner in order to continue to have the Schedule 2 furnishing ability. We are working with licensing right now to clear out any of the people that are caught in limbo. BRN prior to this sent out deficiency letters that said that you completed through the CE part. And so on that review, we will be granting those because we did, as the BRN say, to complete it that way. And we are working on messaging to get messaging out to go to the nurse practitioner programs, because as we found out when we corrected this and came into alignment with our statutes and regs, that there were out-of-state nurse practitioner programs that were also telling their students to take those CEUs. So we are working on messaging. We will continue to allow for both the CEU as well as the new process to continue until the first of the year. And then after the first of the year, we will accept only the process that is outlined in statute, and we will no longer utilize a continuing education provider because that is for renewal and not initial. And so if you want to reach out to me, I can provide additional information, but all of that has been updated and added to our website, and you'll find it under the APRN section.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Leslie Langley would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Is I submitted the application for the MP 103, and I received. Can you hear me or no?
Yes, we can hear you.
And I received, from the BRN that I have some issues with the application, but there is no way for me to fix the problem because I don't know where to go, and this has been going on since February. And I've been sending emails, and unfortunately, nobody has replied anything. I also want to add my specialty, the psychiatry, under my license. And they said there weren't issues. They didn't receive anything from the school. I reached out to the school. The school told me that they have sent everything, and they submitted everything again back in February. So my application is frozen. I cannot move nowhere, and there is I don't know where to go. Or how can I, find the help that I need to process this?
What I'll ask you to do is reach out to Matthew Yates. And he just sent me a contact that says, hey, have her reach out to me and he'll work with you. So his email address is MAT. Hopefully you're able to write this down. And
I'm
so are you ready?
Yeah, M as in Mary, A apple, T Tom.
Yes, MATTHEW dot YEATES at dca.ca.gov.
At
also on his
DCA?
website. Yes.
Uh-huh.
.ca.gov. You can also go to our website under Contact Us and find various staff contacts. He is also listed there.
Okay. So like I said, I've been, sending emails, but there's no response. And there's
That
no
did not occur. And so if you can reach out to him, we'll work to get that fixed.
I will reach out to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comment. Bobby Dalton G. Roy would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Unit 21 chairperson with SAIU Local 1000. And I just wanted to react to Executive Director Melby's comments about the need to fully staff, and that the biggest barrier has been the pay. Unfortunately, the pay is not the only challenge, in that if you cannot fully staff up, if the BRN cannot fully staff up, then the work cannot get done, and it puts the rest of California at great risk. And we know that the healthcare system is built upon RNs, and I have grave concerns with that. Fortunately, however, Executive Director Melby was correct that during negotiations, we were able to get a 5% pay increase for the nursing education consultants. And fortunately, though, while it's not enough, there is another avenue that the BRN and the Department of Consumer Affairs can avail of, and it's the CalHR process. They have an HR manual 1715, and it's their employee compensation request policy. And during years between negotiations, the DCA and the Board of RN and any department can actually submit this compensation request policy and advocate for increases to various classifications that may be struggling to hire. and or the individuals are just very incredibly deserving of this pay increase because their wages are not meeting the market rate. So I encourage the board and the BRN and the DCA to look at the CalHR policy 1715 employee compensation requests. Thank you very much and have a good day.
Thank you, Bobby. And just to let you know, that is in process.
Thank you for your comment. Board President Trujillo, there are no other public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, please. Thank you. All right, moving on in the agenda. 5.4, this is information only, registered nursing fund condition. We have the DCA budget office. Have they been elevated?
Yes, Suzanne is up.
Okay.
It's not muted.
Great.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Suzanne Balkes, and I'm a budget manager with the DCA budget office. I want to thank the board and the executive staff for allowing me time to present the board's fund condition. I will be presenting the board's fund condition that we currently have FM3 projections included into, and you will see that on page 56 of agenda item 5.4 in your meeting material. For prior year, which is 22-23, the board have an adjusted beginning balance of about 56 million, projected total revenue of 81 million, and we are tracking an overall expenditure of 60 million. With that expenditure and revenue, the ending balance is 77 million, which is about 14.3 months in reserve. For current year, which is 23-24, and it's based on 2023 Budget Act and FM3 projections included into, the board have a beginning balance of 77 million, projected revenue of 79 million, loan to general fund of 65 million, and we're tracking an overall expenditure of about 64 million. With that expenditure and revenue, we are estimating a fund balance of about 27 million, which is about 4.9 months in reserve. Budget year is based on governor's budget, and budget year plus one is based on Realize. We are also projecting loan payback of 30 million in 24-25 from the general fund, and we do not have any concern for this fund. Available if you have any questions.
Thank you, Suzanne. Any questions or comments from the board members?
Yes, this is Board Member Cormack. Thank you so much, Ms. Balkes. It's nice to see you again. 2 questions. I see that of all the years, there's the largest difference between last year and this year in expenses. We go from 55 million to 60 million. Can you explain what's contained in that expense increase?
And you talk about the prior year, right? Where it says 55 million for expenditure.
Yes,
and then
yes.
the total
From the prior fiscal year to the current fiscal year, if you look at all the deltas across your 5 columns, that's the only one with a 5 million delta. So I'd just like to understand, what is embedded in that increase.
And a lot of it is to do to salary increases. We have salary increases and expenditure increase. And one of the other thing, this is only FM3. So we do not have except 3 months of actuals for this fund. So in this case, we try to project always a little bit higher toward the beginning until we have more contracts coming in and more information of what is going on. And this is based on also we're projecting to be filling more positions, and maybe the board is not going to be filling some of these positions. So it's just a projection that we were hoping to fill these positions, but not necessarily we are going to. But once the month is going actually more and everything, we will be changing that amount.
Okay. And I'm sorry, did you say when the $65,000, are these in thousands, when the $65 million loan is going to be repaid?
So the 65 million is going to be actually a new loan to the general fund, and the 30 million is what is going to be repaid.
Right. So when is the 65 million due?
We do not have an estimated time of when it is going to be repaid, and we're working actually with the Department of Finance to see when it is going to be repaid. And once it is repaid, it is going to be with interest.
Okay.
And we do not have the interest amount at that time either.
Okay, I'll just renew my hope. I see it's not on the agenda this time, but as I mentioned last time, I would prefer to see more detail, and I think it would be helpful and important for this board to have a better understanding of our current and future expenses as we anticipate, significant changes in use of technology and endorsements, et cetera, et cetera. So if the board, if the chair of the board and the executive director are so inclined to agendize this in the future, it'd be my pleasure to help and serve. Thank you.
So it would be done under this specific agenda. We wouldn't have to do an additional agenda. We would just have to ensure that they are prepared to give the detailed information.
Okay, so then the specific question that I would have is understanding the major portion of our expenses. How much is salary? How much is contracts? How much is whatever else there is? I don't know where administrative overhead is. I don't know if that's the statewide general expenditures, probably that list. Yeah, okay. And then understanding how proposed, I think as I talked about last time, sources and uses of funds, matching, where do the fees come from? Where does the revenue come from? And are we using it in those same categories? Just some general information as we think about changing fees. I'm reluctant to do that until I have a better understanding of what we're spending now and where that comes from. Thanks.
So just a quick update to that. All of our revenue comes from fees. We are completely funded through our fees and nothing else. And any fee changes do have to come through regulatory change or legislative change. We did in the last sunset ask to have all of our fee floors lowered prior to January 1 of 2023, which removed all the fee floors. All of our fees were set at the very minimum. We were not able to drop our fees any lower. So now that we had the legislative changes that dropped out the fee floor, we will now be able to move forward with doing some desk audits and some fee studies and be able to see what we can do related to adjusting any of those fees. One of the fees that we're looking at most currently right now is the public health nurse fee. That was missed in the sunset update. We looked at 2815 instead of just 2816. So we have on the cleanup for the legislative year suggested that we add in that fee to remove the floor of the PHN fees with this cleanup cycle in the next legislative session. That will allow us to consider not having a renewal for public health nurse. That has been a big one that we have heard extensively, that is something that they that is an impedance to them in entering the workforce. One of the other things that our sunset bill did was combine our nurse practitioner and our nurse midwife with the furnishing. What that does on initial application, instead of a nurse practitioner or a nurse midwife paying $500 for that certification and an additional furnishing in, I believe it's $350. It's actually $400. They do not have to pay that $400 fee. And that just became in effect in January. So we will see a drop and no longer collecting that $400 initial application fee for furnishing license, as it is then combined with our nurse practitioner and our nurse midwife. Additionally, with our schools, they were paying for any school that became approved after 2013, they were paying a $15,000 continuing approval visit fee for the nursing education consultants to come out and do an assessment of their program. We removed that fee completely and aligned, and that came with our sunset bill as well, effective January 1. And so many of these fees that we adjusted through this year's sunset bill, and those changes are not yet to be felt. That will be felt in the next budget cycle, and we'll be able to see how those changes affect our numbers. The other thing that meeting with Suzanne and her team brought into awareness for us is the endorsement application. So as we've talked about in 2020, the endorsement applications were only 10,000. Those endorsement applications moving to 20,000 and then to 40,000 and sustaining is, we're worried that it might just be a COVID effect. We're not confident that that will continue. And in fact, this year, we're projecting a 10% decrease, which again would affect our budget. And so for license by endorsement, you are paying $350. And so when you have that increase from 10,000 to 40,000, there's a budget surplus that will happen for that. If we were to go and make changes right now and that be a COVID phenomenon, then that would affect our bottom dollar and be a risk. And so at that point, we've decided to hold off on that so that we are not making that change right now until we can kind of see what happens over the next year, what the fee changes that we're confident in doing allows us to do, and work towards moving forward with that. The one thing that we are pretty confident that we will change as well is the $300 application fee for California grads, because it is now an automated process. It doesn't require the staff time that it did. And so we will be looking at dropping that fee for our California grads and any of them that have been automated to that event. So lots of changes happening, but all of our fees and all of our revenue, all of our entire budget comes from the fees collected by our applicants. And as we look to streamline processes, decrease the amount of applications, we have about 40 applications. And as we decrease those, we will see our revenue change by decreasing fees to our applicants through those matters.
Thanks so much. I think it's that level of information that is more helpful than just the fund condition, which is at the top level. I hate to ask for more information, but I think when major fee changes are made, even that level of mapping of, hey, what are the 3 biggest things we get? How much, that sort of information, I think is really reassuring to the public as opposed to the high level, which is hard to understand. Thanks.
Yeah. Something?
Yes.
Yes. This to me looks like a pretty basic financial statement that goes at a high level board meeting. And if we are going to change how we do something, I think that should be a board discussion. And if there's to be an addendum report, then we should discuss that before we make changes to what is a pretty typical financial statement. So maybe that's something that can be done in an ad hoc meeting. But I don't know how Suzanne feels about that. You're muted.
Thank you. I would be providing any information that Lori or the board requests. So just let me know what you need and I would be able to provide it.
This was presented only, but if you guys do want to make a motion and ask, not a motion, sorry, if you guys do have ideas that you would want, send me an email and I will ask Suzanne to add that to the next report out.
And this is Reza, board counsel. I was just going to add that I don't know, kind of following up on Vicky's point, I'm not sure whether the ask from Allison would kind of be in lieu of what's currently being presented at the higher level or as kind of a additional piece. And if it's not in lieu of, then, maybe it's not necessarily considered a change, but just an additional piece of information that you all get. Understanding that each of you might want to kind of see things in a slightly different way, that's totally fair. Is that maybe this is best for Suzanne, is that I don't think we want to overburden you, but is that feasible for it to be kind of an additional part of the presentation?
Can add the presentation with the fund condition in some of the board meetings that we have or the bureau's meetings. What we do is we add the expenditure and the revenue, but anything beside that, we need to have the data and the research and everything. So we will work with the EO on that.
Okay, so it sounds like we can maintain the current kind of high level, like Vicki said, the kind of standard report out, and then work on getting any additional information kind of incorporated into it as Allison sought. So I'm not sure that we need, a motion or something. It doesn't sound like a.
Just an email sent to me by the board members specifying what they need, and I will work with Suzanne and through Matt to get that taken care of.
Yeah, this is Mary. I agree. I think especially as we're making changes in the fees to see the impact on the revenue going forward, and that the dates that are in the longer term forecast would be really helpful, as well as any impact I think that making some changes and improvements will have on our expenses as well. And then Suzanne, just one question. Is there a target for the months in reserve that we are looking for?
So we always try to keep it between 6 months and 24 months, but we do not have any concern actually for the board right now.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments from the board members?
And this is information only. No motion is needed. We can make a public comment.
Yes. All right, I believe we went out to public comment already, correct?
On the fund, I don't believe so.
Oh, you're right. All right, BRN moderator, can you please open it up for public comment? Thank you.
Public comment now. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Board President Trujillo, there are no public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Suzanne. All right, moving on in the agenda. We have a presentation. This is information only. The Registered Nursing Fund condition. Oh, that was already presented. I'm sorry. Information only presentation by the National Council of State Boards of Nursing on e-Notify.
Thank you. We just elevated Jason Schwartz from NCSBN, and he will provide his report on e-Notify. And Jason, if you want to share your screen and manage your that is acceptable.
Fantastic. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you, Lori. Thank you, members of the board, and thank you, Californians, for hosting me. It's good to be back home. I grew up in LA, went to college in the Bay Area, and lived in the Monterey Bay for 10 years. So anyways, here I am in Chicago, but let me share my screen real quick. And give me 1 sec to pull up the right thing. Okay. Okay, I think we are good. Let's see. Can somebody confirm that you can see my slides? Okay, fantastic. So thank you, everybody. I'm Jason Schwartz, Director of Outreach at NCSBN. Again, it's an honor to be here. I'll also say Happy Nurse Practitioner Week to the NPs in the audience. I'm here to talk about Nursis eNotify. This is a free service of NCSBN that may be of interest to many of you. So I'll use a number of words that may be unfamiliar. Whenever I say Nursis, think database that we administer at NCSBN that combines the licensure data from every state board and U.S. territory. So with that, my agenda is fairly brief. We've done the welcome. I mostly want to talk about Nursis eNotify for institutions, meaning employers such as hospitals, but also sometimes other organizations. But I'll also touch on two other things: the eNotify service that we provide to individual nurses, and also something called NCSBN ID that you may or may not be familiar with already. So what is Nursis eNotify for institutions? Well, it's a free service of NCSBN, and it's being used right now by more than 13,000 employers and other organizations. What is it really? Well, it is kind of like the eNotify name suggests, automatic electronic notifications whenever there are changes in the licensure status of your nurses. So I've certainly worked with employers who tell me that their standard process had always been maybe every month or even every quarter to manually do lookups, maybe on the state board website, for all the nurses that they employ to make sure that everything is current. This essentially replaces that process because it automates from our database covering all state boards this information to you. So flexible and configurable in a few ways. You can sort of sign up in a lot of different ways, and I'll touch on some of those, but you can also consume the information in different ways. For instance, some people like email updates, some people like weekly, some people like monthly reports, etc. So my graphic here, right, it's a little amateur, I suppose, but the idea is state licensure data from anywhere to your organization automatically without your need to go look for it one by one or through some other process. For employers, for organizations that would want to enroll, you would go to nursis.com. You would click on the button that says Access eNotify, and then the choice you would select is called Create an Institution Account. So essentially a three-step process just to get started, and then there's a little more to do, and I'll go into that as well. So there are three different ways to enroll fundamentally, and I would say for the most part, it depends on the size of your organization, but sometimes on the, I'll call it IT savvy of your organization. The easiest way to enroll, but generally you wouldn't do this if you had a lot of employees, is called Enroll a Nurse. And we really just walk you through step by step. You enter information on the nurses that you employ, we capture it, and then we have the information we need to provide you with updates whenever there's a change to licensure status. Now, some groups that do that at some point think to themselves, I wonder if there's a more efficient way, for instance, an Excel spreadsheet with all the information NCSBN needs, and I just give them that. And it's true, there is that. That's our second option. It's our most popular option. Typical user, hospital, more than 5-10 nurses on the payroll, for instance, and up to 20,000. Spreadsheet has been used. Essentially, you give us a spreadsheet with the information we need, formatted in a fairly particular way, and we're able to get you notifications anytime there are licensure changes. The third solution, I'll probably say the least about this, but if you're even bigger than that, and you have pretty good IT support to help you do some of these things, because it's definitely a more high-tech approach, is what's called the API, right? And that essentially automates everything straight out of your HR system or whatnot. Information, data is fed to us, and we feed information back to you. And there's essentially no manual touches past the initial setup. So 3 different ways to enroll, essentially small, medium, or large, but there's flexibility. We don't pigeonhole you into any one of these 3. What information do you provide us? I apologize, you may notice a little bit of an Ohio spin on some of this data, but at any rate, you supply us with some fairly basic information about the nurses in your organization, and then we are able to make exact matches with nurses in the databases of all the different states. And you may say, do I care about other states besides California? But I would say yes. For example, you may have an RN working for you in California, and there may be action against their Missouri license, let's just say, for diverting drugs from patients. You would want to know that, and we would give you that notification. So you're getting more than just California information. You're certainly getting the California information that you value most. But if there are other relevant things, we shoot those to you as well. I'll kind of skip the little tour of the different fields for the moment. But what do you end up with? Well, you get current and accurate data, and it's automated. It's no longer a manual process to ensure current licenses for all of your nurses. We also offer renewal reminders. Remember, I said things are flexible. If you say, oh, I don't want to be notified every time somebody's license is within 30 days of expiration, that's okay. You can turn that off, right? But the point is, if you want it, it's there. Disciplinary actions, not just from your jurisdiction, but from everywhere. So that's a really powerful thing that I think would be almost impossible to do without Nurses e-Notify. And there's also flexibility how you would consume this information. The dashboard is very popular, but we've got other options as well. One that we call a nurse list, also just emails. So I'll just show you what the dashboard looks like. This isn't meant to be a demo or a deep dive, so it's really just at a glance. But for instance, if I had 300 nurses working for me, well, I would see that I've got 200 nurses on my roster, essentially. There's one where there's an encumbered license or something that I need to look at there. 12 about to expire, and thankfully none that have already expired, that sort of thing. If you would rather see what would look like kind of a large Excel of all of your folks and their status across various columns or fields, then you would click on Nurse List instead, and you would get that kind of view. So, okay, what else? I mentioned this already, but again, it's flexible. Not everybody wants the same feed, so you have control over things. Do you want these updates daily, weekly, monthly, this sort of thing? And there are a lot of other parameters that you can control. So sometimes by the time I get done with my show and tell, people are like, wait, how do I sign up? So I always try to repeat this slide. Nurses.com, that's really the home of Nurses and e-Notify. Click on Access e-Notify, and then you would create your account. And what you would select for this institutional option is create an institution account. From there, you would then create a login for yourself. If you're the admin, let's say, of this group of nurses, but you can also, because we don't really want one person to feel obligated to do all of the work, right? You can also name essentially co-admins or assign privileges to other people on your team. So we've got that as well. Okay, with that, I'll offer that generally employers that are thinking about the service but want a little guidance in terms of, am I better with the Excel versus the API, or how does this work exactly, or does it give me information on this and this and this? I'm probably your person. You see my email address there, jschwartz@ncsbn.org. You can always feel free to write to me and I'll do my best to help. If you're a little further along and it's more like technology troubleshooting, a much more qualified team of experts is at Nurses e-Notify@ncsbn.org. Now, either way, if you write to me, I can send you to them if that's where things belong. So happy to help. With that, I'll just mention quickly that beyond the solution for institutions, organizations, employers, etc., there's also an individual solution. So I know there are a lot of nurses here at this meeting, and for each of you, I would encourage you to consider signing up for the e-Notify for Individuals service. Again, it's free. It's being used nationwide by more than 1 million nurses now. I think we passed that threshold in August of this year. Again, what's the point? Well, automated, current, accurate data relating to all of your nursing licenses. And hopefully this hardly ever happens, but we know it sometimes does. One of the benefits, because many people say, well, I already know when my license will expire. I would certainly know if there were disciplinary action, but in cases of fraud or identity theft, there may be things going on. with your license that obviously aren't legitimate, well, you would know right away if there's something happening there, and then you could step in and investigate. So that's certainly a benefit of the service for individuals. But for other folks that say, you know what, I'll take the reminder, I'll take the license expiration reminder, well, we've got you covered. It takes probably less than 3 minutes to sign up for the service. And again, it's free, and we won't sell your information or do anything like that. It's only to receive these notifications. How do you sign up for that? Well, the first 2 steps are the same. You go to nurses.com, you click on Access eNotify, but this time you say create a nurse account. So there's essentially 2 different versions of eNotify, one for organizations and one for individuals. That's it. Final thing that I want to cover, I sure appreciate everybody's time so far, so I'm trying to be efficient here, but the final thing I'd like to introduce for some of you is NCSBN ID. What is the NCSBN ID? Well, it's a unique nurse identifier held by all nurses licensed in the US. Now, unique nurse identifier is kind of a data sort of term, right? It's a little bit of data jargon, but the idea is if you work with large data sets, or if you have people in your organization who work with large data sets, they will appreciate unique nurse identifiers. Think of it kind of like a social security number for nurses, but it's not what we would call PII, right? It's not confidential data. It's a public identifier, and each nurse has one. You may wonder, what's mine? I didn't know I had one. And if you go to nurses.com through our quick confirm license verification, and you just type your name in, right, or your information in, for instance, Doug Jalis here, right next to Doug Jalis, it has NCSBN ID 455-87099. All licensed nurses in the US have a single ID provided by NCSBN, and it cuts across all your licenses. For instance, you might have an LVN license and an RN license and an APRN license, and it cuts across all jurisdictions. So you might be licensed in California plus Missouri plus New York, something like that. Single ID. You don't have 6 of them. You just have the one. Some quick benefits. Well, nurses already have this, so that's good news. It doesn't expire, won't be assigned to somebody else, and it links essentially all the different licenses together that a single nurse might hold. So for things like transmitting data sets that include nurses, it's a really, really nice, slick, and efficient way to positively ID the specific nurse and not have confusion of is this the same person as this, or do I have the same person in here twice? So with that, I'll just indicate that all of these things that I covered very, very quickly, I have some flyers on. So if anybody would like more information, you've got my email. If you'd like to help spread the word on any of these, well, I would sure appreciate that. So with that, I'll just say thank you, California. My contact information is here again. And then I didn't plan this. I think I'm wearing the same exact outfit that I have in the photo. So I guess you know it's really me. All right. With that, let me unshare my slides and return things, Lori, to you and the team.
Thank you.
Really appreciate the information. We do offer, of course, eNotify. There's a little bit on our website, but you would find much more information on NCSBN. And we have heard a lot of wonderful things with this, especially from an employer perspective. When you're dealing with people that are carrying multiple state licensures, not just a license in California, it is really important to know what they're doing in the other states. And so if you have somebody that's living in Idaho and working in California, and they might do a travel contract and then go back to Idaho and work their normal job and then do another travel contract later on, you've kept them on the books at your facility. You may not know that something occurred in Idaho. And when you have eNotify, you learn about any action that is taken on a license at any point. in any state, and that's key when you're working with your workforce. This is also a really great thing because we did talk about how we now have a military compact with that Service Member Portability Act, right? And those nurses are not licensed in California. And so it is imperative that you guys know that you cannot go on to Breeze and you can't look at disciplinary action that may be on our website because they're not licensed through us. And so e-notify is going to be key in order for you guys to be aware of what's going on with your licensees that are not currently licensed in California as they're being employed at your facility. And that's only going to be able to be obtained through e-notify. That is not something that the Board of Registered Nursing will be able to do because, again, we are not putting them in our data bank as a licensee. They are in a listing that we will have, which right now is an Excel document. So it has no electronic or technology support to get that feedback. And so we are really asking employers to move to e-notify because of the different licensed RN types that will be in California. We want to make sure that you guys are always aware and always in the know. I know when I first started off as a nurse, I had a hard time remembering which certifications needed renewed and when, and I was very worried about that. So as a licensed RN, it's fantastic to get those notices. Say, hey, you're supposed to notice you're noticing now you have to renew your license. Our board does send out a postcard, but this is an electronic ping as well. So I know I'm not checking my mail on an everyday basis, but I am checking my phone all day long. So getting that through that manner, I think would trigger motion for me sooner than waiting for a postcard to come in the mail. And then there is some errors that do occur. We do get communication from NCSPN where it says this person has let us know that this information is incorrect. Please update that. And so we are constantly going in and updating our system, and it comes from people really being aware of what's going on with their license. We have heard that there are people with same names that get their information crossed. And then we've also heard people that are juniors or seniors or first or seconds and thirds that get that information crossed too. So it doesn't even have to be identity theft. It could just be an error in documentation that allows for information to be exchanged that was incorrect. And so keeping an eye on your license, knowing what's going on with your license is very, very helpful and really will aid in you managing your professional life and your outcome. And that nurse identifier, one of the things, and I don't know if you touched on this, Jason, was the nurse identifier also helps with workforce, where they're able to track where that person works and provide data on that. And so NCSPN is known as a huge help to the regulatory boards throughout the nation. And they are also an amazing research partner. And so they with that unique identifier are really able to kind of track migration of US nurses and where they work and what's going on. So it's wonderful, wonderful information for us to have.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Any other questions or comments from the board?
I have a question.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Jason, thank you. This is fantastic. How is the information getting out to facilities?
Well, that's a good question. We certainly have a lot of information on the website. I make presentations like this occasionally at hospital association gatherings or board meetings like this. But we would certainly love any further support in terms of promoting the offering. I do my best, certainly, but I will say there's never a week that goes by where I meet somebody who's interested in it and hadn't heard about it before. So I've got some more work to do.
We have a full FTE that's doing this. So I think that's a tremendous opportunity. So definitely, yeah, thanks so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Jason, I'll share your information out with the California Hospital Associations and such within California and see if they can reach out to you and get some presentations going, because we absolutely support eNotify. We've been a supporter of it since I think 2012. So go ahead. We'll help you get the word out because it only benefits us as well.
California leading the way. Thank you.
Trying to. Thank you so much, Jason.
Bye-bye.
Listen, anybody else have a comment?
Yes, thank you, Chair Trujillo. This is Board Member Cormack. So 2 questions. I just want to be sure I understand the data flow from nurses to the BRN. Is that a daily update? If a nurse who's licensed in California is disciplined elsewhere, how quickly is the BRN informed of that using this system?
Okay, so we have agreements with each board to get data anywhere between real time or 1 business day at most later, right? So something like a 24-hour feed.
Okay, and that's bidirectional, meaning the BRN here in California also provides information to you if someone is disciplined here, and then also you provide information to us if someone is disciplined elsewhere?
Oh, I'm sorry. So let me clarify. I would say it's actually unidirectional in the sense that the BRN would essentially give us a feed of your data so that we would be updating nurses, but we would then push that data out only to subscribers. So for instance, if there were an employer whose nurse was impacted by that update, we would push that out, but we don't necessarily pull out or push out a full feed to every board, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. So next question is for Executive Director Melby. So presumably we have somebody working on this that pulls information as needed.
It's a separate process. We have in our enforcement unit, when we file accusations, when we take disciplinary action, that is done and it is updated in Breeze, and our Breeze communicates with NCSBN every night. It's an electronic data transfer that goes across. We do not use eNotify to come into us. We get speed memos, nurses notifications, et cetera, that comes to us because we are contracted with NCSBN directly as a board of nursing. And so our data is different than what you would get as a healthcare facility or a licensee because we are a regulating board. When we're, and not like the data is different, our data transfer is different. Sorry, thank you. It's based on a contract that we have and such. Now, if you're looking at how we are notified of our licensees that are disciplined, that comes through that fingerprint process. Our fingerprint process, when it comes to us through LiveScan and through the Department of Justice, anything like that, we get a notification that day, that next day. So when we come in office, we pull Corey, we get all those notifications, and we make movement on them on a daily basis. And that comes from fingerprint hits.
Thanks, that's very helpful. Appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments from the board members? All right, BRN moderator, can you please open it up for public comment?
Public comment now. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in the request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Board President Trujillo, there are no public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, thank you. All right, this was information only, no motion needed. We're moving on to 5.6, information only. Presentation by the NCSBN on the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on nursing education, a national study of pre-licensure RN programs. Do we have a speaker elevated?
We have a speaker. He is in the attendees. Can you elevate Brendan, please, board moderator?
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Brendan, we're going to do the same as we did last board meeting. We'll let you kind of take over and share your PowerPoint.
Absolutely. Madam President, Executive Director Melby, members of the board and public, good morning and thank you for this opportunity. Please give me a second as I share the screen. You should see this very shortly. Is everyone able to see my presentation? Excellent.
Yes.
All right. So my name is Brendan Martin, and I am the Director of Research at the National Council of State Boards of Nursing. As I mentioned, I am very happy to be here today to briefly discuss the results of one of our recently completed COVID-19 studies, assessing the impact of the pandemic on nursing education, a national study of pre-licensure RN programs. For today's presentation, I'm going to cover a few major points. As the publication for these study results, if you have not yet taken a look, constitutes over a 60-page supplement to a peer-reviewed journal. I really wanted to help with what we affectionately refer to as the heavy lift of reviewing such a large volume of data by providing some basic overview of this study and then some general results to really aid further discussion and any questions that you might have at conclusion. To start, I'll provide a bit of background on our longitudinal assessment of pre-licensure RN education to give you both the necessary context for why we wanted to pursue the study in the first place, and then ultimately really what we hoped to achieve with our study. I'll then provide an overview of the study methodologies so that you are clear on how we selected our sample, went about collecting the data and ultimately analyze the results. If nothing else, we aspire for full transparency. And then we will get into the meat of the presentation in which I will cover really the broad strokes. Again, this is a 60-page report. I'll cover the broad strokes of the results and then share a reference to the full report for those who are interested. At the conclusion, then, I will try to tie many of the findings that we were able to kind of pull out of the sample with some other information related to pre-licensure nursing education during the pandemic, both in terms of industry research and other sources. So after that, I will open the floor to any questions or comments that you have so that we can kind of seek clarification as necessary. So just by way of background and to provide a little context for our discussion today, I wanted to take you all back to early 2020. Our annual research agenda here at NCSBN typically includes anywhere between 30 to 40 active studies. But in early April 2020, like all of us, we began to recognize the potential for the broad effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on nursing. So we really planned a targeted, but ultimately fairly expansive research agenda focused exclusively on the pandemic. In effect, this became our singular priority and really our priority for the 2 to 3 years to follow. The agenda overall included 10 applied research studies of different scopes, designs, and timelines. Topics included some of the information that I presented on just a month or two ago related to the workforce trends, but we also captured information on early career and APRN practice, and then pre-licensure nursing education, of course. But the biggest takeaway is really that we wanted to capture as best as possible the impact of the pandemic really on every level of nursing. One of the things that I would be remiss if I did not draw your attention to right up front, and I will reiterate this throughout the presentation, is all of the studies that we conducted on the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic as it related to any level of nursing are freely available and can be downloaded effectively right now from the Journal of Nursing Regulation website. So these are free for download, and any follow-up or necessary clarification is able to be coordinated on a study-by-study basis. One of the principal and therefore most critical studies assessing the impact of the pandemic on the profession was, of course, our National Nursing Workforce Survey, which, as I mentioned, and many of you are aware, I presented to the board just a month or two ago. However, as my general overview of our research agenda kind of indicated, we anticipated that the impact of the pandemic wouldn't be limited to just the current U.S. nursing workforce. That was the bulk of our focus. But in parallel, we did also conduct a longitudinal assessment of pre-licensure RN programs across the United States. And that is what I'm here today to focus on. So the primary objective of that study was to assess the impact of institutional, academic, and demographic characteristics on pre-licensure nursing students' academic, initial post-graduation, and early career outcomes during the COVID-19 pandemic. This cross-sectional study ultimately utilized a 4-phased longitudinal design to assess outcomes for pre-licensure RN students entering the core of their nursing curriculum in fall 2020 and with an anticipated graduation in spring 2022. So because this was not a randomized trial with a kind of a forced intervention, we tried to impose as much uniformity on the data sample as was possible. And so that is really why we defined a cohort of interest and didn't necessarily look at, maybe nurses a semester earlier in their program or nurses in different types of cohorts, such as accelerated Bachelor of Science of Nursing programs. When considering the entire arc of the research, from July 2020 to December 2022, we really conducted a 2.5-year-long study of 51 pre-licensure RN programs, including over 1,100 participants, just over 700 students, and over 400 faculty across 27 U.S. states. This mixed methods study ultimately leveraged more than 4,000 course-based observations, supplemented by hundreds of early career observations through the first 6 months of employment, and then ultimately the rich personal narratives of over 60 focus group participants. The general time frame for this study is displayed in front of you, so you can kind of get a sense of when we were in the field to collect the information we were interested in, and then how it kind of flowed throughout the full 2.5-year study period. So in July 2020, we conducted email-based outreach to administrators and faculty at all pre-licensure RN programs across the country for which we had a designated email contact. In total, over 500 programs responded. This really provided critical information about how their planned delivery of educational materials had changed in light of the pandemic, but it also functioned as a means or kind of a platform to kick off formal longitudinal tracking of pre-licensure RN student and faculty outcomes in August 2020 as well. The period of within program data collection then carried forward through the end of May 2022, as you can see from the diagram in front of you. This really served as one of our first major inflection points in the data collection process, as we were pivoting away from program and student outcomes as reported primarily by faculty, students, and administrators at the program itself, to a focus on early career tracking in June 2022. There were 2 primary intervals associated with early career data tracking. The first was at 3 months following graduation, or August 2022, and then the other was in November 2022, or again, 6 months post-graduation. In parallel, as you can see, we also conducted targeted focus groups with over 60 students, faculty, and administrators from June to August 2022. And then finally, all of our formal data collection really closed in early December 2022. Regarding the methodology, the study utilized a combination of real-time student and faculty self-report data via email-based surveys using Qualtrics, including what we refer to as in-house and externally validated instruments. So I'll be very clear, we used the in-house survey instruments. So those were survey instruments that we generated ourselves organically within the research department at NCSBN, really to just do 2 things. One, we needed to consent participants to kind of onboard them onto the study. And the second, as part of that process, we wanted to collect a basic self-report demographic and kind of practice or professional characteristics. Those are the only data points that we used our in-house surveys for. For all study outcomes, we used externally validated instruments exclusively. So what do I mean by that? Those are instruments which were pre-vetted, were determined in kind of other settings to be reliable and valid instruments to collect out that information and then to report it in kind of a systematic and universally understood manner as it related to broader concepts of student learning and engagement. Collection of within and end of program standardized test scores was then facilitated through direct coordination with individual research site coordinators. So those were folks, oftentimes administrators and faculty at participating programs who volunteered or were designated by potentially the dean or the chair of the department to serve as the on-site coordinator for data collection. They were really the means of communicating the importance of adherence to the study, initial recruitment for the study, and they also served as our kind of primary focal point for transferring some of that information securely. All qualitative or quantitative survey findings were supplemented with focus group findings, as I mentioned on the prior slide. Focus groups were generated based on a purposeful sample selected from the faculty, students, and administrators who agreed to participate in the previous phases of the longitudinal study that began in August 2020. Participants were placed into one of 3 discussion groups distinctly associated with either the role as a faculty member, a student, or as a program administrator. In the event that a participant wore 2 hats, and this did occur, it often took the form of a faculty member also holding an administrative role or having some administrative duties or vice versa. We asked that they select the role that really accounted for the majority of their responsibilities and time so that we didn't have any issues of one individual's voice kind of coming to the fore too strongly across the 3 discussion groups. I'm not going to get too deeply into the weeds on this last part. We employed various statistical methods ranging from simpler descriptive. Oftentimes when we could, we really relied on descriptive elements of the survey sample and the response patterns because we felt as though that was the most approachable to the broadest possible audience. But when necessary, we did employ non-parametric statistical methods. And then at kind of like the nth degree level, generalized estimating equation models, which allowed us to capture information which was ultimately nested in nature. And so what do I mean by that? Those could be students that kind of cluster within a particular course and courses which cluster within a particular program. You have to account for that in the analysis, and we were able to do so appropriately with that type of modeling approach. We then also overlaid a detailed textual analysis, trying to capture some of the open-ended feedback associated not just with the focus groups, but also some free text response options available through the quantitative survey. We then used all of this information really to assess, broadly speaking, student, faculty, and institution level data against all of our outcomes. Like our recently completed workforce survey, this study, we would argue, and I think that this holds up still 6-7 months later, this study really stands as one of the most comprehensive assessments, certainly at a national scale, of pre-licensure nursing education in the United States since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. There are other studies similar in scale in terms of the sample size, but there are very few that were able to leverage the longitudinal nature of our data tracking, and certainly many fewer that were able to take as comprehensive a snapshot of the pre-licensure nursing education landscape as we were, as we included both standardized outcomes, focus groups outcomes, and outcomes as reported by students and faculty themselves via externally validated instruments, as I mentioned. So here is where I make yet another plug. I liked Jason's style, so I'm mimicking it. As I did mention right up front, the results of this study, our workforce study, and any other studies that we conducted on the COVID-19 pandemic are free for download on the JNR site. And I've included both a link as well as any of the other pertinent information regarding authorship, title of the study, etc. on the Journal of Nursing Regulation website. We highly encourage you to access that information. We made it free access, not only through our publisher because it was related to the pandemic, but because we felt it was very important to broadly disseminate the findings. So here we are kind of pivoting a little bit to really the meat of the presentation. The findings of our work indicate and confirm largely the impact of the pandemic was obviously not limited to the current workforce. So breaking news right there. Our over 80% of the programs that participated in our summer 2022 or 2020, baseline survey planned to incorporate clinical simulation instruction to some degree or another in the fall 2020 term. And while that might sound like a lot, the magnitude of this shift is perhaps made even more evident by the number of programs that offered no clinical simulation pre and post-pandemic onset. That number fell from 130 programs in our over 500 program set to just 11 programs in fall 2020. So as part of that baseline survey, we asked them what they had done in terms of clinical instruction in the prior term. So the most recent similar like for like profile term, which was fall 2019 prior to the pandemic, and then what they anticipated for fall 2020. So the number of programs that said that they offered no clinical simulation fell from 130 prior to the pandemic to just 11, the direct fall semester starting after the pandemic. On the slide in front of you, you can see how the mean usage of face-to-face, high fidelity, and virtual simulation changed term over the 2-year study period. Notice those proportions stack. I always like to draw people's attention to that. That's what that vertical dotted line refers to. So you can see that they're really additive and they result in higher summary academic year figures. So there was a heavy reliance on clinical simulation during these periods of time. But the other thing that I would note, and I think that this kind of dovetails with our own personal and professional experiences with the pandemic, there was really a heightened or pronounced spike in the first academic year under investigation, that 2020 to 2021 academic year. And while the rates remained pretty high for the second academic year in our study, they obviously dropped off quite considerably. A consistent trend that emerged from our study were the superior outcomes documented both by students and faculty alike for in-person clinicals or face-to-face high-fidelity simulations vis-a-vis virtual simulated environments. So these results really manifested time and again in a variety of ways, including observed patterns as reported by program setting, type, student SES, and the timing of students' clinical rotations, just to name a few. But some important context for these findings that I really want to make sure it doesn't get missed. These results likely reflect the range as documented in our study and is documented very broadly across the literature on this topic. It really likely attests to the variability in the quality and the sheer breadth of the virtual methods that were employed during the COVID-19 pandemic. So, and specifically there, I'm talking about the virtual clinical simulation. I would not interpret our findings to suggest that all virtual clinical simulation methods are bad. Rather, what we determined through the course of our own analysis and what we see reflected in the literature, certainly since our publication, is that the virtual clinical simulation kind of space likely hasn't reached a certain level of maturation just yet to allow us to distinguish the good from the bad. So there was a very, very broad range, even in just our study, of programs that were ultimately asking their students to preview or to review kind of fabricated videos that were then embedded on YouTube, all the way up to, $50,000 a pair of Google glasses, to do augmented or virtual reality. So a very, very broad range. Further, on a positive note, one of the things that was really heartening to see in this particular study is this study really functioned as kind of a large natural experiment that ultimately replicated the results of our national simulation study that we had done about a decade ago, confirming that good adherence to evidence-based guidelines for face-to-face high-fidelity simulation. So those are the simulations where oftentimes the faculty are trained, there's simulation labs, there's high-fidelity mannequins, there's debriefing, there's very close engagement and working with the students in this simulated space. Those types of settings produce consistently strong outcomes and oftentimes were comparable to the in-person clinicals in our study. On the next few slides, this is where we're going to catch up a little bit and make up a little bit more time because I know some of this is dense. I'll very briefly give you a glimpse of how consistent these findings truly were. To start, here are some of the CLEX 2.0 results looking at students' self-reported clinical learning. I'm not really going to dwell on any one of these tables too long, but here you can clearly see the drop-off documented by students for virtual clinical learning. So in that highlighted portion, you can see that the overall mean sum scores were clearly lower and significantly so for virtual simulation, whereas the in-person clinical placement and the face-to-face simulation scores were much more comparable. Similar trends for the faculty CCEI. So when I say CLEX 2.0, CCEI, these are abbreviated forms. You can see on the tables in front of you what the full spelled out title is. Those are essentially a reference to the externally validated instrument that we employed. Again, here we are looking at standardized examination scores. So unless otherwise specified, standardized examination scores does not mean NCLEX. These were kind of the various vendors that programs worked with. So it could be HESI, ATI, Kaplan, etc. So these were the within program standardized test scores. And then finally here on this one, we have the NCLEX results. Shifts to online delivery of lecture content were even more pronounced in our sample. Across the pre-licensure nursing education landscape, there was a 60% increase in the planned use of online lectures during the fall 2020 term compared to the fall 2019 term. Strikingly, the number of programs that offered no online lecture hours decreased from 167 in fall 2019 to just 21 in fall 2020. This near wholesale shift, really, that we were able to document to online delivery of lecture content inevitably impacted students' learning and engagement as well. In-person and hybrid learning consistently surpassed on pretty much every single measure reported outcomes for online exclusively embedded content. So students who enrolled in in-person and hybrid lecture courses ultimately reported higher levels of engagement and academic learning in those hybrid and in-person environments compared to the online-only learning environments. Interestingly, these were among the few patterns that also held for standardized examination scores within our study as well, with programs that reported a larger online presence more likely to report a lower NCLEX RN result as well, albeit ultimately still above the national average on the NCLEX results. Again, just a word of caution, these results should not necessarily be interpreted as all online learning is bad. I don't think that that was the intended purpose of our results. What we found, though, was that the quality of the deliverables and the platform matter a great deal. The investment by these programs, both in terms of faculty training, the means of delivering the content, the quality of the content itself, etc., is very, very important, as does the proportion of the content that programs were ultimately deciding to host online. So it was the pandemic. We are careful not to throw rocks at glass houses. You know, we were all doing our best, and these programs were doing their best around the country with very little time, very little margin for error, and very few additional resources. So this was really just about kind of capturing how far can we go and how far did we go and what were the possible outcomes linked to how far we went during this kind of unprecedented emergency context. As before, similar to the clinical results, here you see the students' CAP perceived learning scale results when comparing the delivery method for the didactic portion of students' program. So again, you can start to see similarities in the hybrid and in-person scoring, whereas the scores are just a little bit lower or oftentimes significantly lower for the online only or exclusive content. Here are the SECM results. Again, the fully spelled out version of the instrument is right there in front of you for the table. These were looking specifically at student engagement as well. So we wanted to go beyond just simply academic learning, as there's a fair amount of evidence suggesting linkages between engagement and learning, and in particular knowledge retention. And then ultimately standardized examination results. You'll notice some of these are trends, like the 0.08, that's more of a trend than a significant result, and then a few more standardized examination results. So our research in this area, as I mentioned, we also looked at post-graduation outcomes. We also were able to document significant declines in the self-reported clinical preparedness of pre-licensure RN graduates, and then similar drop-offs in the practice proficiency of early career nurses, driven by some of these more pronounced shifts to remote and virtually simulated educational models that, like I said, were required by the pandemic oftentimes. This table here in front of you presents our early career outcomes assessing clinical preparedness and practice proficiency associated with clinical characteristics. So you can see how we broke down the initial simulation, virtual simulation, and the clinical courses. And then again, associated with the didactic courses. So you can see in very few cases were programs not leveraging many of these methodologies or a lot of these modalities, but it was really the proportion or the scale at which they were leveraging that we were able to draw a distinction. Disconcertingly, this is where I'm going to kind of work in some of this industry research here before I open it up to questions. Recent AACN data has also documented drop-offs in not only enrollment in BSN programs, so that's that kind of red vertical bar that you see dipping after all of the kind of the green trees. This was a first, as you can see this, I think here nicely visualized, a first in over 20 years of data tracking. So this is one of the first instances that they have documented an enrollment decline year to year in over 20 years of tracking. But they also, in parallel to this, documented a drop in the number of applications to baccalaureate programs. So while certainly a bit outside of our scope here at NCSBN, I do include these findings because I think that they reinforce, and this kind of just builds on the workforce presentation that I was able to give a while back. It really just builds on, I think, a case of evidence underscoring how wide-ranging the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic have been. And I think that they likely really highlight that we'll be dealing with its enduring effects for some time to come. And we're really still just kind of wrapping our heads around how enduring some of these kind of long-term effects might be. Similarly, I provide the citation for a recent AACN publication on nursing faculty burnout, which certainly attests to the fact that issues of exhaustion and stress are not limited to the frontline healthcare workforce, but this has direct implications for pre-licensure RN programs trying to recover from the pandemic. And so again, what we're kind of seeing is a constellation of rigorous studies providing evidence of, effectively, we would argue, an industry battered from all sides over the past couple of years. So what are the main takeaways? The effects of the pandemic on pre-licensure nursing education, similar to the workforce, I think are abundantly clear. That doesn't certainly constitute breaking news. But more informative, perhaps, are the fact that the findings related to programs' significant reliance on virtual clinical simulation and online delivery content of that lecture content during the pandemic, and then really the corresponding deleterious effects on student outcomes. By contrast, our study largely replicated, as I mentioned earlier, the results of the National Simulation Study, confirming good adherence to evidence-based high fidelity, kind of that face-to-face simulation, does produce consistently strong outcomes and oftentimes at comparable levels to the in-person clinicals when done appropriately and with the appropriate safeguards. But it's really kind of the variability within that virtual space that ultimately the concern kind of emerged in our analysis. More importantly, though, I think than really anything, our study underscores that new nurses likely feel they are in a more precarious position than they really ever have been. Thus, we would argue an urgent demand exists for practice partners to respond to the needs of new nurse graduates and really facilitate in a formal manner, a fully funded manner, in a dedicated way, transitions to early career practice to develop a sense of salience in what has effectively kind of become a transformed healthcare landscape. Further, there must be efforts to address gaps in nursing education that were revealed during the pandemic, particularly as it relates to disaster and public health emergency education and training. And then, of course, there must be efforts to improve the use of educational technology to facilitate experiential learning opportunities. That is a particular nod not only to the online lecture delivery platforms, but in particular to the virtual clinical simulation, where we really need to get to a space where there's a great deal more rigor, that there's evidence-based guidelines to really guide practice in that space. And so with that, I really Director Melby knows this very well. I could go on and on. I have to reel myself in. And even when I reel myself in, I've already been talking for about an hour and a half. So there are so many intersections for the findings that we were able to draw out of this study with both our workforce work, ongoing workforce work, as well as other industry research. But if I don't stop myself, I never will. So I really do. I thank you for your time. I thank you for your attention, and really just generally the opportunity to share this important information. And with that, I will, let's see if I can stop sharing. And certainly happy to turn the floor back over to you for any questions that you might have.
I have a couple, I have a comment and a question, if that's all right, Madam Chair. Thanks. Thanks, Brendan. That really was very, very helpful. So I appreciated not only hearing the results, but hearing some solutions about, how I guess employers have to react. I mean, I didn't hear a role for the BRN in any of your solutions. I heard that employers really need to take into account these new employees coming into the workforce. But I guess I'd like your comments on that. And if there is a role for BRN, I'd appreciate your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Yes. So I'll kind of address it in two parts. The first is you are absolutely right. I think what was crystallized for us in the findings from this study was really that the onus, particularly in terms as it relates to catching some of these new nurse graduates up to speed in a practice setting, really falls on employers to really have those formal transition to practice kind of residency programs in place, to fully fund them, to dedicate time and resources to not only catching new graduates up potentially on practical skills, but also giving them the confidence that potentially they feel like they lost. So in our focus groups, we had numerous, and I don't want to overblow it, right, because it's a little bit more anecdotal in nature, that evidence, but we had numerous students and in times faculty basically attest to the fact that some of them were graduating without ever having put in an IV in an in-person setting. In some instances, they had only seen a video of somebody doing it. They had never even tried to do something in kind of a high fidelity, more controlled simulated environment. And so I think it's kind of like a moment in time almost, where when I see a lot of these presentations and I hear a lot of the research, it's kind of about how do we apply lessons learned moving forward, and how do we understand how things have changed from prior to the pandemic. But what we think kind of gets a little bit lost in that narrative is that there is a cohort in that 2 to 3 year period of nursing students who then ultimately became graduates and who have become new career professionals who need further assistance. They need real resources to be brought to bear, both in terms of funding and training and mentoring, really, in the healthcare space, to make sure that essentially, my prior presentation on the workforce, we are seeing unprecedented levels of projected intent to leave among a lot of these folks within 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 years of their career. And I think in this particular instance, we run the risk of kind of a heightened or pronounced inflection point if more isn't done for that group. Taking your second point, I 100% agree with you. I really focused on, kind of what did we learn about what they had to do by necessity and how that correlated with outcomes for both new nurse graduates and early career professionals, and what does that mean for employers and, patient safety, et cetera. In terms of the role that the board can play, this is where I would encourage everyone really to go to our website, go to the Journal of Nursing Regulation website and to access the free data that we had. So in many instances, what we did with our baseline data is we actually published a few standalone studies in addition to this, in a supplement to this study, where we were looking at essentially overlaying Board of Nursing guidance with what programs felt that they were permitted to do in very high pressure, time sensitive situations. And what we found was the downstream experience of students and faculty in these programs was absolutely dictated by the decisions that the administrators at these programs were making, which was absolutely dependent upon, in many situations, or at least influenced by, proactive, regular, clear Board of Nursing guidance. So we saw significant correlations between when boards of nursing were very clear and early and proactive in disseminating guidance on what was permissible and what wasn't permissible. We saw follow through. in statistically significant manners. And oftentimes you didn't even need, I'll be the first to attest to the fact you don't need to put a p-value on everything. If it goes from 20 to 60% and it's a fairly good sample size, you don't need below 0.05 to tell you that that's meaningful. Those levels were what we were able to document in those jurisdictions. So what I would argue is one of the wonderful findings that we found from the regulatory perspective, really across the entire suite of studies that we conducted, was that people really relied on, I think we all ask ourselves the question, how much do people listen to me? Like how much does their follow-through action depend on what I say? We found consistently across an array of outcomes, both employers, educational programs, individual practitioners, et cetera, they were looking for guidance, and when they got guidance, it moved the needle. And so I think that would be the role for the board in kind of, future crisis events and just generally speaking, kind of regular times. That proactive communication, oftentimes those programs are looking for it. And when they receive it, they take action accordingly. And then that really, really 100% has a demonstrated effect on the student experience and then ultimately their preparation and the patient safety implications.
I would imagine that findings on this study would help assist schools with making up plans should there ever be another, hopefully not, but should there ever be another pandemic. This is great information. Thank you for presenting it.
Yeah, Madam President, I think you're hitting it on the head. We have taken this presentation on the road, as Director Melby knows, one of the reasons that I'm here today. And whenever we speak to crowds of, program administrators or nursing faculty, or, when students are in attendance, there is definitely a resonance with the lived experience. Yes. But what they take from it is, I thought that was just, because they're researchers themselves oftentimes, they think to themselves, well, I just thought that was anecdotal. I thought that was my experience. And what they've been able to basically confirm through multiple engagements with us is that they really can take this back and they can be proactive. And in fact, what they were able to oftentimes, and again, anecdotal in nature, these are one-off conversations oftentimes at conferences or, virtual webinars, they attest to what I just said, which is it was so helpful when the executive director of the board or the president of the board reached out with a mass communication saying, this is what, oftentimes very early in the pandemic, obviously this was the regulatory framework prior to the pandemic. We are clear-eyed about the broad effects of the pandemic. Here is the new regulatory guidance. And program administrators and faculty were coming up to us and saying that really did give us confidence that while we had to move quickly and we didn't always have, all the resources in the world, what we were doing wasn't going to come back to bite us. And so it allowed them to focus on doing their job. And so I think that, like you said, it's not only kind of a nice confirmation of the lived experience, but moving forward, it's a sense of, okay, what did we learn? What can we apply moving forward? Like you say, hopefully we don't have this come to pass again. But I also think it speaks to the fact that, there are things in the day-to-day and the normal times as well, where you can apply some of these lessons.
Definitely.
I have a question.
David?
Oh, sorry, I didn't see David.
It's a quick two-part question, Brendan. First of all, I appreciate your presentation. I always love how deeply you dive into these studies. And I'm trying to only draw the conclusions you're drawing by looking at the numbers and not putting on my own personal bias or cynical lens that I see the world through. However, a two-part question. Have you done a study on the financial impact on the universities when they crisscrossed and went almost directly to the virtual simulations? Because my thought is, I wonder how much more profitable that is for the institutions compared to what it takes to do face-to-face clinical work. And my second part of that question is this study ongoing so we can see the academic year 22-23, 23-24, who's still doing it now when it's not necessary, to which I would draw the conclusion they're doing it for profit. Does that make sense? That's my question.
First of all, if I could just say, let me preface my response by the fact that I don't always get the comment. I love your level of detail. So, I have to embrace those moments when I get them. So I'll take your kind of the two-part question in kind of sequence. The first one is in terms of the financial impact on programs. As I mentioned, kind of the data more specifically related to the programs relating to nursing education, we try to stay within our lane a little bit. So that's probably going to be more AACN and those types of groups who would look at that. We did ask questions as it related to resource availability, extra resources being furnished to kind of try to get people up to speed, right? Because even at kind of a basic level, for those programs that were maybe, relying on YouTube, right, which has effectively no cost, were there any resources brought to bear to kind of train faculty as to how to best incorporate these new resources into it? What we found, and it was in some of our results that we highlighted it, in most instances, and I don't think that this will surprise you, in the academic settings, oftentimes the programs were asking faculty and administrators to do more with no more. So even in these heightened cases, they weren't getting additional funding. They weren't even necessarily getting the same funding for those that were a little bit more enrollment driven in terms of their budgeting. By the time fall 2020 rolled around, in some instances, they weren't even getting the same levels of funding to do more. So I think that's kind of, to the extent that we could and to the extent that we planned it, we did embed that information. We found that significantly kind of moved the needle in terms of student outcomes on engagement and learning. Were programs able to offer any resources, additional training for these faculty trying to do so much in such a heightened kind of shortened timeline? But we have not looked at kind of overall profitability or how they saved money as it related to using a different modality or not. We just linked that with student outcomes and then ultimately patient safety. The other piece is, I can't tell you how much we wanted to extend this. What we kind of were limited by, and you might just see it, is that ultimately what this boiled down to was a large natural experiment. So the way that we got buy-in in such a short time frame is we basically said, we're not imposing an external intervention. We're saying, do what you are going to do regardless of your participation in this study. We're just asking you to document it rigorously and then to help us work and communicate with students to get those outcomes documented rigorously. So we imposed really beyond program type and that cohort setting that I was talking about, we imposed very few restrictions as we could while still trying to have kind of a standardized as best as possible cohort that we could track. We imposed very few restrictions on programs. And so we ended up with 51 programs across 27 states. If we could have had 900 studies across 900 programs across all 50 states, that would have been our goal. It was a self-selection on the part of programs. And so even for those 51 programs who of their own goodwill decided, yes, we'll take on this little extra bit more, by the end of it, we did, in kind of our closing call, say there is an opportunity here to continue longitudinal data tracking, and there's just very little traction. For many of the reasons that you might guess, we didn't include this as a data point because we didn't set out to document it in a standardized fashion. So we didn't want to skew people's understanding of the results one way or the other. But many of the programs attested to significant faculty and administrator attrition and turnover during even just our small 2-year cycle. And so by the end of it, in some instances, we were on the third, study site coordinator. They were wonderful. Everybody was wonderful. Everybody really stuck with it, which was fantastic. But ultimately, getting them to sign on to more years of data tracking proved a little bit too difficult. But I think you're right. And we do the age-old addition at the end of our published results, which is there really needs to be continued research on this, because what we found, and I will say this anecdotally, when we did the focus groups following graduation for our cohort of interest, what we heard from the administrators and the faculty is as soon as they possibly could, they snapped back to more vetted modes of instruction. So as soon as they could, they got back to in-person clinicals. They got back to if they had the resources and there were no more, kind of proximity restrictions, face-to-face high fidelity simulation. We did see a lot of the early adoption of virtual simulation. And if you remember that chart, the kind of the mean usage of face-to-face and virtual, it really dropped off that second year, in particular for virtual. I do agree, and the literature attests to it, virtual simulation, the adoption of that method saves considerable money, in particular if you're not doing the 50,000 pair of Google Glasses. But the flip side is what we actually heard, kind of anecdotally, was that programs were trying to pull back to what they knew to be, good, reliable delivery methods. How that scales, we didn't track that systematically.
I think one thing real quick, David, just to redirect slightly, is some of the ongoing studies that you're kind of referencing, they offer that at NCSBN through their education oversight. So they have studies that identify at-risk programs, and they talk about over-reliance on simulation. They talk about frequent faculty turnover, cuts in numbers of faculty, trends of decreasing NCLEX pass rates, complaints to the Board of Nursing from students, faculty, clinical sites, or public, pre-licensure programs that are new. They actually qualify that as 7 years or less. And so there are going to be a lot of things that a board can look at for a school to see if they're at risk, not just that are they producing students, but are they an at-risk program? And NCSBN offers that too. What might be of benefit is I can reach out to Nancy Spector, who is over the education, and have her do a presentation on why it is important for the Board of Nursing to do approval visits and what to look at and what shows schools that are identified as at-risk schools. The other thing real quick, Jason, I did see another hand pop up. I wanted to let you know that you align with our UCSF study. When we contract with UCSF, they do our studies. And one of the things that they put out there was, in addition to, what the BRN can do through academia and enrollment increase, et cetera, to address some of the workforce shortage, was healthcare, and this is a direct quote, healthcare organizations can implement a variety of evidence-based approaches to mitigate burnout among their workforce, including improving communication, establishing wellness initiatives, offering individual counseling and group counseling, providing services such as childcare and transportation, assistance, offering of flexibility in workplace, ensuring adequate protective equipment and supplies, and developing peer support programs. And so it really kind of allowed a different take in produce more nurses. It's how do we retain the nurses that we're producing? Because regardless of how many nurses we produce, if they're not maintained, it will never be enough. And one of the things that Joanne Spetz actually said is, in order for BRN to meet workforce, you have to graduate and license 11,000 nurses a year. We do that every year, hands down. And so we're meeting the need through education already. It's amazing to see that, it had been identified that there are partners in this, and that's fantastic. And my final question, just for clarification from you, we did see that there was an effect on NCLEX pass rates. And I believe I talked to you at a conference, and you shared with me that it was 6% nationwide for NCLEX pass rates declining due to COVID. Was that accurate? Or was there?
Yeah, that's outside the scope of this study, but in terms of the regularly reported summary kind of like national NCLEX pass rates, yes, they dipped from, I think, just a bit above 85% prior to the pandemic to just a bit below 80% throughout the course of that kind of 2 to 3 year period. We have seen a bit of a recovery, and we are certainly tracking that very diligently. Our exams department is tracking that very diligently with the recent release of NextGen. So yes, overall, we did see kind of an across the board decline in the landscape. And then we were able to document in our study as well. And can I just say, I can't echo your comments enough. I was doing another presentation. I was co-presenting with Dr. Linda Aiken out of the University of Pennsylvania last week, and we were singing from the same hymn sheet when we basically said, if you think about what policy, the initial question after this presentation was about kind of what folks can do, what employers can do, et cetera, what regulators can do. If we were to espouse a kind of or rank, would be the first priority, the second priority, and the third priority. I jokingly said last week in my presentation, the first priority would be retain and support current nurses. The second one would be retain and support current nurses, and then the third priority would be retain and support current nurses. That is what we're seeing across all of our research. The one thing during COVID that we didn't see a demonstrable dip in, and it's a huge credit to our exams department and their partnership with Pearson VUE, was the number of students who are graduating for programs and the number of folks who are passing the NCLEX in terms of raw numbers. There weren't huge significant dips. So the supply is there, but what we have to be cognizant of, in particular employers, is that in our overall workforce survey, and I don't want to blur too many lines here, I already presented this, but in our overall workforce survey, we saw really a generational shift. We saw older, more experienced nurses leaving the workforce in droves from 2020 to 2022. We documented that those kind of mid-career professionals, which are now being asked to step into those mentorship roles, are experiencing heightened emotional distress, right? In terms of burnout, fatigue, stress, etc. And now we kind of have the three-headed monster of those new nurse graduates entering the workplace in kind of a confidence deficit. And so this is about at all levels. How do we reintegrate, retired nurses who really probably feel like they have more to contribute? How do we support the current workforce, which are now being asked to do, more because they have to kind of onboard and mentor these new nurse graduates? And for these new career entrants, how do we make sure that they feel supported in their new workplace environment so that we're not dealing with the same thing 2 to 3 years down the line that we've really seen over and over again in the literature, which is if there isn't intentional policy and there aren't real solutions brought to bear, folks are not only planning to leave in the next 5 years, many of them are leaving now. And I think that's when we start to tip the conversation towards a healthcare crisis. And then as regulators, right, that's when we get into the really critical conversation associated with patient safety. So I just couldn't echo your comments enough, Loretta. I think that really this is about retention and support, both in terms of people coming in to kind of the workforce funnel, but also those who are in it and potentially trying to reintegrate those who have left. So,
thank you. Patricia, you had your hand up.
My question was about NCLEX, so thank you, Brendan, for answering. Thanks, Lori, for asking that question. I guess I would just follow up with Lori. So Brendan did a national, survey and deep research project. Are you seeing similar NCLEX dips in California specifically?
Yes, and actually, if you look at our board materials, there is a document in there that is under 8.9 information only licensing update. And that has graphing of every school's NCLEX pass rate for the last 4 years.
Thank you. I'll take a peek at that.
Have California overall.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes.
This is probably way off, but I was wondering if anyone is tracking whether there's been an increase in disciplinary actions based on the virtual training.
So that's an excellent question. So a twofold answer. The first is yes, we systematically and regularly, pretty much across all of our studies, one of the primary components that we try to link to any of our analyses is kind of downstream discipline as possible. So we track that diligently. So we've been looking at the RN workforce, the practical nurse workforce, and the APRN workforce. We have not seen any kind of a sharp inflection or spike, really, or any kind of anomalous data point associated with discipline just yet, which is pretty striking when you think about just the sheer breadth of all the interventions that took place across all of those different license types. What I would say though is, and this is where I would just offer a word of caution, I'm a researcher, so I think context is very important. We are only, from where we ended data tracking, we are only about really a year out from when we kind of stopped tracking some of these individuals. So this was a confidential survey. So we were able to identify the participants on our end, and we have continued to look at whether or not that there are any discipline trends associated with those who ultimately went on to pass the NCLEX, obviously, enter practice, and have an active license still to date. We have not seen anything to suggest that there's a correlation with the virtual simulation and discipline. But what I would caution is two things. One, it's a very short timeline, right? And the disciplinary process takes time and takes resources, it takes personnel, and it also takes reporting from the facility to do that, which we know is kind of systemically underreported. But then the other piece of that, just to kind of remember, is if you think back to that line graph of the mean usage of face-to-face and virtual simulation, the reason why I don't want to overblow kind of the deleterious effects of virtual simulation is because I think what we really uncovered in this is that on a very truncated timeline with very, very few resources, with a broad range of modalities and very, very little evidence to guide individual programs, it really didn't work. But to their program, or to their, to kind of give them some praise, programs didn't, generally speaking, go too far when kind of aggregated across our sample. We were still talking about 10 to 15%, sometimes closer for some programs up to 20% virtual clinical simulation. So it did not by any means constitute, so right, the other 80, 85, 90% would be high fidelity face-to-face or in-person clinical, right? And so the vast majority of the clinical instruction was still delivered on vetted evidence-based means. And so while we might not be able to make any direct linkages with discipline associated with virtual clinical simulation, that's more an artifact of the fact that that's not the vast majority of what students experienced. So we were able to tease out, given the granularity of our sample and the sheer volume of information we have, changes on some of those externally validated instruments and some of the standardized test scores. But really, once you started to introduce things like folks being employed, and so there might be some formal onboarding, some training, some mentoring going on in that workplace environment, that kind of becomes a confounder in our kind of the grander scheme of what we're able to link it to. And so what we have seen is that, with some of that influence and with what we had documented in our own study, we have not seen any associations with increases in discipline, which is heartening. It is something that we continue to track, and it's something that we really track across all of our studies. Great question.
Board Member Cormack, may I?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Dr. Martin, welcome back. Thanks to staff in advance for sending the link. That means I have far fewer questions than I did last time. I appreciate that. So listening to this and connecting it to, similar comment I made last time, I think really what we should be thinking about, if we can as a board, is the life cycle of a nurse. Because this is, now we're seeing the support that new nurses are likely to need from employers. And that's probably not going to change given the level of anxiety in the general population, going forward. So I guess my question is really for Executive Director Mel B. So when we heard Dr. Martin talk about the variability in quality and breadth of the virtual simulation, how can or do our nursing education consultants, NECs, engage with the quality of the online simulation? Is that something, that they participate in or have any way of understanding? And then a follow-up would be, surely there are some best practices somehow, somewhere people have figured out which are, which of the, 5 disciplines this works best for. Can you talk a little bit about how we could be making progress there?
Yes. First and foremost, we do actually have an agenda item coming up that has, let me find it here really quick so we know to look forward to that.
It's
and
7.2. Yeah, it was quite short. It just said align with other standards. So
yes. And that's really what it comes down to, is there are plenty of established standards on nursing simulation. NCSBN has recommendations themselves as well, and that was included in there, and really just aligning to that. So out of the sunset bill this last year that was passed and implemented January 1, The Nursing Education Workforce Advisory Committee was tasked with looking at simulation guidance. And so we will have some discussion around that at 7.2. To answer the first part of that question with what the NECs can do, little to nothing, honestly, around simulation, because our regulations focus on direct patient care. We have no statutory or regulatory authority over simulation. What we do have authority over is that anything that is used to meet the clinical aspects of the course, which is additionally simulation, must meet the objectives of the curriculum. And there has to be proof of that. So if we start getting complaints of over-reliance on simulation, of fears of students saying, I haven't taken care of a patient, I'm only doing this virtual sim, which we received a lot of those complaints, and worked with programs on kind of redirecting that and trying to get appropriate clinicals. We did have an increased reliance on the virtual sim with some of our programs, and it did not bode well for their students. And so with that, we did point them back to meeting objectives using standard simulation guidelines and working with that. But our focus historically in statute and regs has been direct patient care and not sim. But now with the NEWAC recommendations that will be shared out at 7.2, the board will have some ability to, discuss and make some possible actions around those and have further discussion on that. And one of the key things that I remember when we were going through this with COVID is one of the legislative staffers said, I can't get people to agree on what simulation standards to use. I would write it in law if I could right now. And so that law did get written, but it did not include direction, honestly, for us. And so what it stated was that they would, the substitute clinical hours not in direct patient care that are simulation experience are based on best practices published by the International Nursing Association of Clinical Simulation and Learning, the National Council of State Boards of Nursing, the Society for Simulation in Healthcare, or equivalent standards approved by the board. And so that was the extent of the legislative guidance that was given to us during COVID to allow for flexibilities. And we're continuing to move forward with just working with NEWAC and seeing if we have to have any regulatory authority. The one thing that has been great with our programs is our programs want to deliver high quality simulation. They do see the benefits of it, and they are by far utilizing those standards. And as Brendan shared, if any of them that went to a virtual format, as soon as they possibly could, they went back to in-person because it was very, very clear that that virtual format was not having the same outcomes as their in-person simulations.
And then I guess just one final thing, a little scary to hear that some nurses graduated without being able to place an IV. Any comment on our California situation? Is that anything that members of the public should be worried about, or is that something?
There are many things that happen in nursing school or don't happen in nursing school. The ask that we do of our programs is that we ensure that the clinical experience that they offer at their program are comparable from student to student. We very much understand that every single student will not receive the same clinical experiences. You have different patients, different times of day, different units that they're going to, but you want them all to be comparable. You want a person that enrolls in one school and another person that enrolls in that same school to graduate with very similar preparation, understanding that all clinical experiences won't be the same, but they should be comparable. Now, there are many times that you won't have an ability to place a Foley catheter on both a female and a male, or an infant or elderly, or start an IV. The Board of Registered Nursing doesn't have a specific stance on what defines competence. That comes with our healthcare organizations. And so we license based on setting the minimum standard of utilizing the NCLEX that tells us these people are minimally competent, safe practitioners. And then when they're hired at the healthcare facilities, it is dependent upon them to competency validate for every item that they have this person do, whether they're a new grad or a experienced nurse of 20 years, 40 years, or a nurse that is new to specialty, that they've been a nurse for 20 years, they worked in the ICU, and now they want to go to labor and delivery. That competence lives with the healthcare facility that is employing them. And then we will make any kind of disciplinary action or something if that competence is not maintained, and anything negligent or malicious or anything like that occurs.
Okay, thanks for the clarification about where our abilities end.
You're welcome.
All right. Any other questions or comments from our board members?
This is information only, Dolores. So we can go to public comment, and I'm sure we have many people waiting for a lunch break to follow public comment. So thank you. And thank you, Jason and Brendan. I know you guys are 2 hours ahead of us, so appreciate you being here with us.
Really do. Thank you. BRN moderator, can you please open it up for public comment?
Public comment now. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Board President Trujillo, there are no public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, thank you. Okay, that concludes section 5.0. I would like to break for lunch, if that is convenient for also the board members. Looking at 45 minutes, does that seem agreeable?
Yes, that sounds good to me.
All right. So it's just about noon time, so we'll break until 12:45 and we'll come back on camera.
Thank you all.
All right, thank you.
Enjoy your lunch.